Before satellites, forensic science, or digital records, entire chapters of humanity slipped into darkness, leaving riddles that still challenge brilliant minds. Ancient messages without translation, vanished expeditions, sealed chambers hiding impossible secrets, and events that refuse every logical explanation continue to defy certainty. Each mystery whispers that the past is far less understood than we believe. So settle in, keep an open mind, and let's uncover history's most chilling, unanswered enigmas together. High in the rugged valleys where the mountains of Central Asia meet windswept plateaus, fragments of stone walls and weathered foundations still cling to the landscape. Dust drifts across abandoned fortifications, while broken columns, faded coins, and scattered pottery hint at a kingdom that once stood at the crossroads of civilizations. Few places better capture the meeting of East and West than the lands once ruled by the Greco-Bactrian kingdom, a realm that flourished between roughly 250 and 125 BC, before disappearing beneath the tides of conquest, migration, and time. The Greco-Bactrian kingdom emerged after the fragmentation of Alexander the Great's empire. Governed by Greek-speaking rulers who had inherited distant provinces of the Seleucid Empire, it developed into a remarkably prosperous state. Its cities became centers of trade, scholarship, and artistic exchange, linking the Mediterranean world with India, Persia, and the vast steppes beyond. Coins bearing finely detailed portraits of kings survive in astonishing numbers, offering glimpses into rulers whose names have otherwise faded into obscurity. Yet coins tell only part of the story. Written records from the kingdom remain surprisingly scarce. Historians often rely on scattered references from Greek and Roman authors, archaeological excavations, and inscriptions recovered from isolated sites. Entire generations of kings appear only briefly before vanishing from the historical record. Their decisions, alliances, and personal lives remain largely unknown. It is this silence that has inspired one of the kingdom's most enduring mysteries. Did the final rulers leave behind an archive that has never been found? The idea is not without historical foundation. Throughout the ancient world, governments depended upon records. Royal correspondence, taxation lists, diplomatic agreements, military reports, and religious documents were carefully preserved in administrative centers. The empires surrounding Bactria, including the Persians, Babylonians, and later kingdoms farther east, maintained extensive archives. It would seem unusual if the Greco-Bactrian rulers had governed without producing similar collections. If such archives once existed, where did they go? Some archaeologists suggest they simply perished. Ancient manuscripts written on papyrus, leather, or wooden tablets rarely survive in regions exposed to fluctuating temperatures and moisture. Fires, warfare, earthquakes, and centuries of rebuilding could easily erase nearly every trace. The kingdom itself experienced repeated invasions during its final decades, facing pressure from nomadic groups moving southward, while political rivalries weakened royal authority. Administrative buildings may have been destroyed long before later civilizations occupied the same ground. Still, certain discoveries encourage continued speculation. Excavations at ancient settlements such as Khanoum have revealed evidence of sophisticated administration, libraries, gymnasiums, temples, and impressive public architecture. Greek philosophical inscriptions appeared alongside local artistic traditions, illustrating an extraordinary blending of cultures. Although no royal archive has been uncovered there, the site's complexity demonstrates that educated officials and organized government certainly existed. Could important records have been transferred elsewhere before catastrophe struck? Another possibility centers on hidden storage chambers. Ancient rulers sometimes protected valuable objects inside sealed rooms beneath palaces or fortresses. Such chambers could contain official seals, financial accounts, diplomatic correspondence, or ceremonial texts intended only for trusted officials. In mountainous terrain, concealed vaults carved into rock would not be impossible. Many remain inaccessible due to landslides, erosion, or modern political instability that limits excavation. Some researchers also point toward the remarkable survival of documents in unexpectedly dry environments elsewhere across Central Asia. Wooden tablets, textiles, and manuscripts have occasionally endured for centuries under favorable conditions. If even a single cache belonging to the Greco-Bactrian court escaped destruction, it might still rest beneath layers of earth, untouched since the kingdom's final years. More speculative theories extend beyond conventional archaeology. A few independent writers have wondered whether royal archives were intentionally removed during the kingdom's collapse, carried east by fleeing nobles, or absorbed into neighboring courts. Others imagine sealed repositories hidden by loyal officials who hoped one day to restore the dynasty. There is little direct evidence supporting these ideas, yet they persist because history contains genuine examples of valuable records being evacuated during times of crisis. The absence of proof has become part of the fascination. Every newly excavated fortress, every forgotten settlement, and every fragment of inscription has the potential to reshape what historians know about this remarkable kingdom. A single collection of documents could reveal unknown rulers, forgotten treaties, commercial networks stretching farther than previously believed, or personal voices that have remained silent for more than 2,000 years. For now, however, the archives of the last Greco-Bactrian kings exist only as a possibility balanced between evidence and imagination. The mountains continue to guard their secrets, while shifting soil conceals whatever still lies beneath. Whether those hidden records were destroyed forever, scattered beyond recognition, or remain patiently waiting beneath an unexplored ruin, is a question that history has not yet answered. If forgotten records can disappear without a trace, perhaps entire resting places can vanish just as completely. From the remote mountains of Central Asia, our journey now follows the ancient trade routes westward to the Mediterranean, where another enduring puzzle lies hidden beneath one of history's most celebrated cities. Far below the crowded streets of modern Alexandria, beneath apartment buildings, busy avenues, and layers of countless generations, stretches a world that few people will ever see. Narrow tunnels disappear into darkness. Flooded chambers reflect faint beams of light. Massive limestone blocks, carved passageways, and silent burial rooms hint at a city that still exists beneath the one visible today. Alexandria has never truly stopped growing, each century simply built upon the remains of the last. Founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BC, Alexandria quickly became one of the greatest cities of the ancient world. It was home to the famous library, the towering lighthouse of Pharos, magnificent royal palaces, and a dynasty known as the Ptolemies, Greek rulers who governed Egypt for nearly 3 centuries. Their wealth was legendary, their politics often ruthless, and their influence reached across the Mediterranean. Yet despite centuries of exploration, one remarkable mystery remains unresolved. Where are the royal tombs of the Ptolemaic kings and queens? Unlike the pyramids of earlier Egyptian pharaohs, no confirmed royal cemetery belonging to the Ptolemaic dynasty has ever been discovered. Historians know these rulers were buried with elaborate ceremonies, but the precise location of their final resting places has remained frustratingly elusive. Ancient writers described royal funerals and impressive mausoleums, yet those descriptions offer only fragments rather than detailed directions. Alexander the Great himself is believed to have been buried in Alexandria after his death in 323 BC. His body reportedly rested within an elaborate tomb that became famous throughout antiquity. Roman emperors are said to have visited it, paying tribute to one of history's greatest military leaders. Some accounts describe a transparent sarcophagus, while others mention precious metals and elaborate decoration. Over time, however, references to the tomb became increasingly vague before disappearing altogether. If the burial place of Alexander could vanish, what became of the rulers buried nearby? Many archaeologists believe the answer lies beneath the modern city itself. Alexandria has endured earthquakes, coastal subsidence, warfare, fires, and continuous urban development for more than 2,000 years. Entire districts now rest beneath later construction, while sections of the ancient shoreline have sunk beneath the Mediterranean. Excavating large areas is extraordinarily difficult, especially in densely populated neighborhoods where modern buildings stand directly above ancient foundations. Excavations have nevertheless revealed tantalizing clues. Archaeologists have uncovered extensive catacombs, ceremonial chambers, temples, and elaborate necropolises around Alexandria. The famous catacombs of Khanoum el-Shokafa demonstrate an extraordinary blend of Greek, Egyptian, and Roman artistic traditions. Elsewhere, underwater surveys have identified submerged palaces, monumental statues, and harbor structures that once formed part of the royal quarter. Each discovery confirms that substantial portions of ancient Alexandria remain hidden from view. Even so, none of these sites has been definitively identified as the royal cemetery of the Ptolemies. Some scholars suggest the mausoleums were destroyed during periods of political upheaval. Alexandria experienced repeated conflicts, including civil wars, invasions, and religious transformations that altered the city's appearance. Valuable building materials were frequently reused, while monuments considered unimportant by later generations gradually disappeared beneath newer construction. A royal tomb built from magnificent stone could have been dismantled piece by piece over centuries without preserving obvious evidence of its original purpose. Others point toward natural forces. Earthquakes struck Alexandria several times during antiquity, reshaping coastlines and damaging major buildings. Combined with rising sea levels and gradual land subsidence, entire sections of the royal district may now lie beneath layers of sediment offshore. Marine archaeology has already transformed our understanding of the city's submerged remains, leading some researchers to wonder whether the missing tombs are waiting beneath the harbor floor. More speculative theories extend beyond conventional archaeology. Some writers have proposed that the royal burials were intentionally concealed to protect them from grave robbers during times of instability. Secret passages, sealed chambers, or carefully disguised entrances appear in many ancient traditions, although direct evidence connecting such features to Alexandria's missing rulers remains absent. Others suggest later rulers quietly relocated royal remains for political or religious reasons, leaving little documentation behind. These possibilities remain difficult to verify, yet they continue to inspire discussion because similar relocations occurred elsewhere in the ancient world. There are also stories passed through generations by local residents, speaking of blocked tunnels uncovered during construction projects or unexplored chambers glimpsed before being sealed once again. Such accounts are almost impossible to confirm, but they reflect a city where every excavation seems capable of revealing another forgotten layer beneath the streets. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not that the tombs remain hidden, but that so much of Alexandria itself has yet to be explored. Modern technology continues to reveal buried architecture using ground-penetrating radar, underwater mapping, and careful excavation, yet vast portions of the ancient capital remain inaccessible. Every new discovery raises fresh questions instead of providing final answers. Somewhere beneath stone, water, and centuries of human activity, the resting places of kings and queens may still endure in complete silence. Whether they were lost through catastrophe, hidden by design, or simply overlooked beneath one of the world's busiest cities remains uncertain. Until those sealed chambers are found, or proven never to have existed where history expects them, the unseen world beneath Alexandria will continue to invite both careful investigation and quiet wonder. If royal tombs can remain concealed beneath one of the world's most famous cities, perhaps wealth can disappear just as completely. Our search now moves east once more, toward the rugged highlands and fertile plains where another empire quietly rose to challenge the great powers of the ancient world, and where one enduring legend refuses to fade. Morning mist settles over rocky hills, abandoned fortresses, and narrow mountain passes that once carried caravans laden with silk, spices, precious metals, and gemstones. Broken walls overlook valleys that have witnessed countless armies, merchants, and travelers. Beneath these landscapes may rest more than forgotten settlements. According to one of antiquity's most persistent traditions, they could also conceal a royal fortune that has never been recovered. The story is often linked to Mithridates I, one of the most influential rulers of the Parthian Empire. Reigning during the 2nd century BC, he transformed what had been a relatively modest kingdom into a dominant regional power. Through military campaigns and careful diplomacy, Mithridates expanded Parthian control across vast territories, capturing important cities and strategic trade routes. His victories reshaped the political balance of the ancient Near East and established foundations that would endure for generations. Expansion on such a scale required enormous resources. Taxes flowed from prosperous cities. Trade caravans crossed Parthian territory carrying valuable goods between east and west. Tribute arrived from newly conquered regions, while gold, silver, finely crafted weapons, luxury textiles, and rare jewels accumulated within royal storehouses. Ancient kingdoms often measured power not only through armies, but through the wealth they could preserve, distribute, and protect. Yet surprisingly little is known about where that wealth was actually kept. Unlike later empires that left extensive administrative records, the Parthians produced relatively few surviving written sources. Much of what historians know comes from neighboring civilizations, archaeological discoveries, coins, and scattered classical accounts. This absence of documentation has created significant gaps in the historical record. Where were the empire's principal treasuries? Were they concentrated within royal capitals, divided among fortified strongholds, or moved frequently to reduce the risk of capture? Several possibilities have been proposed. Some historians suggest that royal wealth remained within major administrative centers, guarded inside heavily protected palace complexes. Others argue that portable riches would have been transferred whenever military conditions demanded it. The Parthians relied heavily upon mobility, adapting quickly to changing threats. If danger approached, transporting valuable assets to secure mountain fortresses or remote strongholds may have been both practical and expected. This practical explanation has gradually merged with legend. Over centuries, stories emerged describing a hidden treasury assembled during Mithridates I's reign and concealed before it could fall into enemy hands. In some versions, trusted officials carried countless chests into isolated valleys known only to a select few. Other accounts describe underground chambers carved into natural rock, protected by concealed entrances that blended seamlessly with the surrounding landscape. Such tales cannot be confirmed through surviving evidence, yet they continue to circulate wherever ancient Parthian ruins stand. The geography itself encourages speculation. Large portions of the former Parthian realm contain rugged mountains, extensive cave systems, and remote plateaus that remain difficult to explore even today. Archaeologists have documented impressive fortifications positioned on elevated ridges, many commanding sweeping views of the surrounding countryside. These locations were naturally defensible and capable of safeguarding valuable supplies during periods of instability. If emergency storehouses once existed, they may now lie buried beneath collapsed masonry, landslides, or centuries of accumulated sediment. Excavations have revealed substantial Parthian architecture, including fortified settlements, temples, administrative buildings, and sophisticated engineering. Coins bearing royal portraits continue to emerge from archaeological sites, demonstrating the empire's economic strength. Hoards of silver and bronze coins have occasionally been discovered, often buried intentionally during times of conflict. These finds confirm that valuable property was sometimes hidden for protection, even if those individual caches are far smaller than the legendary royal treasury. More speculative theories extend beyond conventional archaeology. Some independent researchers wonder whether the treasure was divided among several secret locations, rather than concentrated in a single vault. Others suggest that later rulers quietly recovered portions of it, leaving no surviving record of the operation. There are also traditions claiming that carefully placed symbols once marked hidden repositories, their meanings gradually forgotten as languages evolved and local populations changed. While none of these ideas has been verified, they reflect a broader historical reality. Ancient states frequently concealed wealth during periods of political uncertainty. Local folklore occasionally adds another layer to the mystery. Stories speak of sealed passageways discovered inside ruined fortresses, unexplained chambers beneath isolated hills, or travelers who stumbled upon carved entrances before losing them again. Such accounts remain impossible to authenticate, but they illustrate how landscapes rich in history naturally become home to enduring legends. Perhaps the greatest puzzle is not whether a magnificent treasury existed, but how much of the Parthian world still lies undiscovered. Every excavation reveals another fragment of an empire that once rivaled the greatest powers of its age. Every newly uncovered inscription, coin, or fortress adds detail while simultaneously exposing fresh gaps in the historical picture. If the wealth of Mithridates I was hidden intentionally, it may still rest beneath stone and earth, untouched since the 2nd century BC. Or perhaps the true treasure vanished long ago, scattered through centuries of conquest, trade, and quiet rediscovery. Until stronger evidence emerges, the silent fortresses of the Parthian realm continue to guard their secrets, leaving one lingering question. What, if anything, still waits beneath their ancient foundations? If hidden treasuries can disappear into mountain fortresses, perhaps entire fortunes can vanish amid the chaos of war. Our journey now follows the Mediterranean coastline to the ruins of one of the ancient world's greatest rivals, a city whose final days were marked by fire, desperation, and a mystery that has endured for more than 2,000 years. Along the shores of modern Tunisia, the scattered stones of ancient Carthage overlook a calm blue sea. Gentle waves wash against the coastline where merchant ships once arrived from every corner of the Mediterranean, carrying ivory, silver, fine textiles, spices, and precious metals. Today, only fragments remain: weathered foundations, broken columns, collapsed harbors, and silent reminders of a civilization that once rivaled Rome itself. Beneath these ruins may lie one of history's most elusive unanswered questions. What became of Carthage's wealth during the Third Punic War? By the middle of the 2nd century BC, Carthage had recovered remarkably from earlier conflicts with Rome. Although defeated in previous wars, the city regained prosperity through commerce rather than military expansion. Its merchants established profitable trade networks extending across North Africa, Southern Europe, and beyond. Markets flourished, workshops produced valuable goods, and generations of accumulated wealth once again filled warehouses, temples, and private estates. That prosperity would not last. In 149 BC, Rome launched the Third Punic War, determined to eliminate its longtime rival permanently. The conflict soon became less a conventional campaign than a prolonged siege. Carthage's inhabitants fortified their defenses, manufactured weapons under increasingly desperate conditions, and resisted overwhelming Roman forces for nearly 3 years. Ancient accounts describe extraordinary determination as citizens dismantled buildings for materials and worked tirelessly to sustain the city's final defense. Then, in 146 BC, the siege reached its devastating conclusion. Roman forces captured the city after fierce fighting through its streets. Fires spread across entire districts, magnificent structures collapsed, and much of Carthage was destroyed. Classical historians describe enormous quantities of valuables seized by the victors. Yet those same accounts also leave important questions unanswered. If Carthage had accumulated immense wealth over centuries of trade, where was all of it when the city finally fell? Some historians believe the answer is straightforward. Victorious Roman armies routinely confiscated treasure from conquered cities. Gold, silver, religious objects, weapons, artworks, and luxury goods would have been collected systematically and transported to Rome as spoils of war. Ancient triumphal processions frequently displayed captured wealth before enormous crowds, celebrating military victory while reinforcing Rome's growing power. It is entirely possible that much of Carthage's treasure simply entered Roman possession and gradually disappeared into imperial circulation. Even so, uncertainty remains. Historical records rarely provide detailed inventories of everything recovered after the city's destruction. The confusion following an extended siege would have made careful accounting difficult. Buildings burned for days, valuable materials melted or became buried beneath collapsing masonry, and countless private homes were destroyed before their contents could be documented. The archaeological record reflects this destruction, revealing repeated layers of burning and rebuilding, but offering only scattered glimpses of the city's former riches. Another possibility is that some of Carthage's wealth never reached Roman hands. As the siege tightened, civic leaders may have attempted to safeguard valuable assets. Precious metals could have been concealed inside underground storage chambers, hidden beneath temples, or buried outside the city walls in hopes of future recovery. Such actions would not have been unusual. Throughout history, communities facing invasion have often hidden valuables to prevent their capture, sometimes leaving them undiscovered when those who concealed them never returned. The geography surrounding ancient Carthage has also changed considerably over the centuries. Urban expansion, agricultural development, and natural processes have altered the landscape, while parts of the ancient harbor remain beneath sediment and coastal waters. Marine archaeology has revealed remarkable structures associated with Carthage's ports, demonstrating that significant portions of the ancient city still await investigation beneath both land and sea. These discoveries naturally invite further questions. Could merchant warehouses still conceal sealed deposits beneath collapsed foundations? Might unexplored harbor basins contain cargoes that never departed before the siege closed every escape? Could ceremonial offerings once stored within temples remain buried beneath later construction, overlooked simply because modern excavation has reached only a fraction of the ancient city? More speculative theories take the mystery further still. Some writers have imagined secret evacuations carried out during the siege's final months, with trusted sailors transporting royal or civic treasure toward distant settlements before Roman forces completed their encirclement. Others suggest that religious authorities concealed sacred objects in locations known only to a handful of initiates, believing they could someday return. No convincing evidence confirms these accounts, yet they continue to capture attention because moments of extreme crisis have often inspired extraordinary attempts to preserve what people valued most. Local traditions occasionally speak of hidden chambers beneath the ancient ruins or forgotten passages leading toward the old harbors. Most remain impossible to verify, and many likely grew through generations of storytelling rather than documented history. Still, they reflect an enduring belief that the destruction of Carthage may not have revealed every secret buried beneath its streets. Archaeologists continue to uncover homes, workshops, sanctuaries, and defensive structures, each adding new detail to the story of the city's final days. Yet every discovery also highlights how much remains concealed beneath layers of earth and stone. The silence left by incomplete historical records has become almost as compelling as the physical ruins themselves. Whether Carthage's missing gold was carried away in Roman triumph, hidden during the desperate final months of the siege, or still rests beneath unexplored corners of the ancient city, remains uncertain. Until new evidence emerges from the ground, or perhaps from beneath the Mediterranean itself, the vanished wealth of the Third Punic War continues to linger between documented history and enduring mystery. If entire fortunes can disappear beneath the ruins of a fallen city, perhaps the secrets of a civilization can remain hidden beneath its streets. Our journey now returns to Central Asia, where the winds sweep across the silent remains of Khanoum, a remarkable settlement whose buried foundations continue to raise questions that archaeology has yet to answer. At the meeting point of two great rivers, surrounded by broad plains and distant mountains, the ruins of Khanoum rest beneath layers of dust and fractured stone. From above, the site appears peaceful. Rows of collapsed walls trace the outlines of grand buildings, while broken columns and weathered courtyards hint at a city that once blended Greek traditions with the cultures of Central Asia. Yet beneath these visible remains lies another landscape, one that remains almost entirely unexplored. What, if anything, exists below the city itself? Discovered by modern archaeologists in the 20th century, Khanoum quickly transformed scholarly understanding of the Hellenistic world. Believed to have flourished during the era of the Greco-Bactrian kingdom, the city revealed theaters, gymnasiums, temples, administrative buildings, and elegant residences unlike anything previously expected so far from the Mediterranean. Greek inscriptions appeared alongside local artistic influences, illustrating an extraordinary meeting of civilizations at the edge of the known world. Even after years of excavation, however, much of the settlement remains concealed. Only portions of the ancient city have been systematically explored, while significant areas still lie beneath accumulated soil. Political instability and the challenges of preserving archaeological sites have further limited investigation. As a result, countless structures remain untouched, leaving researchers with an incomplete picture of how the city functioned during its height. Among the most intriguing possibilities is the existence of hidden passageways beneath Khanoum. The idea did not emerge solely from imagination. Ancient cities often contained underground features designed for practical purposes. Storage vaults protected grain and valuable goods from harsh weather. Drainage systems carried away seasonal floodwaters. Wells, cisterns, and service corridors connected different parts of urban centers. Defensive tunnels occasionally allowed movement during periods of siege, while foundations sometimes incorporated hidden chambers that served administrative or ceremonial functions. Given the sophistication of Khanoum's architecture, such underground structures would not be unexpected. Archaeological excavations have already demonstrated impressive engineering throughout the site. Public buildings followed carefully planned layouts, while construction techniques reflected both Greek and regional traditions. This level of organization suggests that builders possessed the knowledge and resources to create complex infrastructure extending below ground as well as above it. Yet direct evidence for extensive hidden passages remains limited. Several excavated areas have revealed underground spaces associated with storage and structural foundations, but no confirmed network of secret tunnels has been documented. Even so, incomplete excavation leaves open the possibility that additional subterranean features remain undiscovered beneath sections of the city that have never been examined. Some archaeologists believe any underground corridors would most likely have served practical rather than mysterious purposes. Administrative complexes may have required secure storage for tax records, official seals, or valuable commodities. Religious buildings sometimes incorporated enclosed chambers, reserved for rituals or sacred objects. Wealthy residences could also have included cool underground rooms for preserving food or protecting possessions during periods of conflict. Other interpretations venture cautiously beyond established evidence. Because Khanoum occupied an important frontier between competing powers, some researchers have wondered whether concealed escape routes were incorporated into the city's defenses. During times of invasion, hidden passages could have allowed officials or soldiers to move unnoticed between strategic locations or evacuate important individuals if outer defenses collapsed. Comparable features have been identified at certain fortified settlements elsewhere, although none has yet been conclusively demonstrated at Khanoum itself. Local traditions occasionally add further layers to the mystery. Stories passed through nearby communities have spoken of buried chambers, blocked entrances, and underground corridors stretching far beyond the visible ruins. Such accounts are difficult to evaluate because they have often been transmitted orally over many generations, gradually blending observation with folklore. While these stories cannot be accepted as historical evidence, they reflect a long-standing belief that the city's visible remains represent only a fraction of what still lies beneath the surface. Modern technology offers new ways to investigate these possibilities. Ground-penetrating radar, satellite imaging, and non-invasive surveying methods have transformed archaeological research in many parts of the world, allowing buried structures to be identified without immediate excavation. If conditions permit future studies at Khanoum, these techniques may reveal patterns invisible to earlier generations of researchers. There is another reason the mystery continues to attract attention. Khanoum appears to have been abandoned after a period of conflict, leaving behind a city frozen at a pivotal moment in history. If underground chambers were sealed during those final years, they might preserve objects rarely encountered elsewhere. Administrative archives, ceremonial equipment, personal belongings, or inscriptions could remain protected beneath collapsed buildings, offering voices from a civilization that is still only partially understood. For now, however, the earth keeps its silence. The winds continue to cross empty courtyards where scholars, merchants, and officials once gathered, while unseen foundations extend into darkness below. Whether hidden passages truly weave beneath Khanoum, or whether the legend has grown from the city's many unanswered questions, remains uncertain. Until more of the ancient settlement is explored, the greatest discoveries may still rest just beyond the reach of daylight, waiting beneath layers of stone and time. If hidden chambers can remain concealed beneath an ancient city for centuries, perhaps entire collections of knowledge can disappear just as completely. Our path now leads west once again, to a hill overlooking the Aegean world, where one of antiquity's greatest centers of learning may still guard a mystery not of gold or stone, but of words that have never been recovered. High above the fertile plains of western Anatolia, the ruins of Pergamon stand against the horizon. Marble columns rise from broken terraces, while steep stairways lead toward the remains of temples, palaces, and public squares that once formed the heart of a powerful Hellenistic kingdom. The wind moves quietly through shattered walls where philosophers debated, scholars copied manuscripts, and generations of scribes devoted their lives to preserving human knowledge. Among the city's greatest achievements was its famous library. During the reign of the Attalid dynasty, particularly in the 2nd century BC, Pergamon became one of the ancient world's foremost intellectual centers. Ancient writers describe a library containing hundreds of thousands of manuscript scrolls, rivaling the celebrated collections of Alexandria. Whether those reported numbers were entirely accurate remains uncertain, but there is little doubt that Pergamon attracted scholars from across the Mediterranean and invested enormous resources in collecting and producing written works. The city became especially renowned for the use of parchment, a writing material traditionally associated with Pergamon itself. Although parchment existed elsewhere before the city's rise, local craftsmen refined its production to remarkable quality. Durable, flexible, and easier to preserve than papyrus under certain conditions, it allowed important texts to survive generations of careful use. Yet one question continues to linger. What became of the library's most valuable manuscripts? Historical sources suggest that parts of Pergamon's collection may eventually have been transferred elsewhere. One well-known ancient tradition claims that thousands of scrolls were presented to Cleopatra by Mark Antony, supposedly enriching the Library of Alexandria. Modern historians debate the reliability of this account, noting that surviving evidence is limited and often written long after the events themselves. Even if some manuscripts were relocated, it remains unlikely that every document simply vanished in a single transfer. Among the missing works, the most intriguing are those sometimes described as sacred or restricted texts. Ancient libraries did not contain only poetry, philosophy, or scientific treatises. They also preserved temple records, ritual instructions, religious commentaries, astronomical observations, and writings connected to local cults and ceremonial traditions. Some texts may have been copied frequently, while others existed in only a handful of carefully guarded versions. If unique religious manuscripts were housed within Pergamon's library, their disappearance would represent an extraordinary loss to history. Unfortunately, surviving catalogs of the collection have not endured. Without complete inventories, historians cannot determine exactly which works once filled the library's shelves. Archaeological discoveries reveal the impressive architectural setting in which scholars studied, yet the manuscripts themselves have almost entirely disappeared. Fire, humidity, warfare, gradual decay, and centuries of political change all provide plausible explanations for such losses. Organic writing materials rarely survive unless preserved under exceptional environmental conditions. Still, unanswered questions remain. Did every manuscript perish through natural causes, or were some deliberately removed before disaster struck? Several historians suggest that valuable religious writings may have been transferred to temples or private collections during periods of political uncertainty. Libraries often served as active institutions rather than permanent vaults, with manuscripts copied, exchanged, and relocated according to changing circumstances. A scroll leaving Pergamon for scholarly study elsewhere might easily vanish from the historical record without leaving any trace of its journey. Others have wondered whether sealed storage rooms once existed within or beneath the library complex. Ancient institutions frequently maintained protected archives for administrative documents, and especially valuable texts. Such rooms could have safeguarded rare manuscripts from theft or environmental damage. Although excavations have revealed important architectural features, much of the ancient city still remains beneath later deposits, leaving open the possibility that undiscovered chambers may yet exist. More speculative ideas extend beyond established archaeology. Some independent researchers have imagined that priests associated with Pergamon's great sanctuaries intentionally concealed sacred writings as foreign powers expanded their influence across the region. Others suggest that manuscripts containing specialized ritual knowledge were quietly absorbed into private collections, passing through generations before eventually disappearing altogether. No convincing evidence confirms these possibilities, but they persist because history offers many examples of valuable texts surviving only through unexpected journeys. There are also enduring traditions describing hidden repositories beneath religious complexes throughout the ancient Mediterranean. While such stories often become embellished over time, occasional archaeological discoveries have shown that forgotten storerooms and sealed archives do sometimes emerge where no one expected them. Every newly uncovered inscription reminds historians how incomplete the surviving literary record truly is. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not the number of manuscripts that vanished, but the knowledge they may have contained. Lost historical chronicles could have described kingdoms now known only through fragments. Religious commentaries might have preserved beliefs that faded without written memory. Scientific observations could have recorded ideas centuries ahead of their time, only to disappear before reaching later generations. Today, visitors walk among Pergamon's quiet ruins, surrounded by magnificent architecture that still reflects the city's former brilliance. Yet the voices that once echoed through its library remain almost entirely silent. Whether the vanished sacred books were destroyed, scattered across distant lands, hidden within forgotten archives, or simply reduced to dust by time itself, remains unknown. Until new discoveries emerge from the earth, or an overlooked manuscript appears in an unexpected place. The lost writings of Pergamon continue to remind us that history's greatest treasures are not always made of gold. They are sometimes composed of words that no one has read for more than 2,000 years. If entire libraries can vanish until only scattered references remain, perhaps the same can happen to the people who filled those pages with knowledge. From the silent halls of Pergamon, our journey now turns toward the cold northern seas, following the fading footsteps of an explorer whose remarkable voyage changed the ancient world's understanding of geography, only for his own story to disappear into uncertainty. Gray waves roll endlessly beneath an overcast sky. Jagged cliffs rise above restless waters, while icy winds sweep across distant islands where summer daylight lingers long after sunset. The sea stretches toward a horizon that seems to dissolve into mist, blurring the boundary between land and sky. It is an environment both beautiful and unforgiving, one that still carries an air of isolation even in the modern age. More than 2,000 years ago, these waters may have witnessed one of history's most extraordinary expeditions. At the center of that journey stood Pytheas, a Greek explorer and geographer from the city of Massalia, now known as Marseille. During the late 4th century BC, he undertook a voyage unlike any previously recorded by Mediterranean writers. While most Greek knowledge focused on familiar coastlines, Pytheas sailed far beyond established trade routes, exploring regions that many of his contemporaries considered almost unimaginable. His original account, often known by the title On the Ocean, no longer survives. Everything historians know about his expedition comes from later authors who quoted or criticized portions of his work. Writers such as Strabo, Polybius, and Pliny the Elder preserved fragments of his observations, although not all of them accepted his claims. Some believed his descriptions were exaggerated or impossible, while others acknowledged that he had gathered valuable geographical information unavailable from any earlier source. Among his most famous descriptions was a distant northern land called Thule. Pytheas wrote of a place where the nights became extraordinarily short, where frozen seas lay nearby, and where ordinary distinctions between water, ice, and mist seemed to disappear. Modern scholars have proposed several possible locations for Thule, including parts of Norway, Iceland, the Faroe Islands, or other northern regions. No single identification has achieved universal agreement, leaving one of the expedition's greatest destinations open to continued debate. His observations extended beyond geography alone. Pytheas carefully described the relationship between the moon and ocean tides, an insight that demonstrated remarkable scientific curiosity for his era. He recorded information about local customs, trade in amber, climates unlike those of the Mediterranean, and unfamiliar landscapes that expanded Greek understanding of the wider world. Many details once dismissed as fantasy have later been shown to correspond surprisingly well with conditions found in Northern Europe. Yet after this remarkable achievement, the historical record grows unexpectedly quiet. Almost nothing is known about Pytheas himself once his voyage ended. Ancient sources reveal little about his later years, the circumstances of his death, or even whether he completed additional expeditions. His personal story seems to fade almost as completely as the manuscript he composed. The simplest explanation is also the most likely. Pytheas may simply have returned home, continued his work, and died without attracting further attention from surviving historians. Ancient biographies often focused on rulers, generals, and political leaders rather than scholars or navigators. If later generations failed to preserve records of his life, the details could easily have disappeared through the ordinary passage of time. Still, the silence has encouraged deeper questions. Could his travels have continued beyond what later writers recorded? Did he discover places that never entered surviving manuscripts? Some historians have noted that only fragments of On the Ocean remain. Entire sections may have been lost centuries before medieval copies of classical works were produced. If so, substantial portions of his experiences may have vanished forever without leaving any trace. Others have wondered whether skepticism from influential writers contributed to his disappearance from history. Since some classical authors openly questioned his credibility, later scholars may have copied his work less frequently than that of more widely accepted authorities. In the ancient world, manuscripts survived only if generations of scribes considered them worth preserving. A single decision not to reproduce a text could gradually erase it from history. More speculative theories have naturally emerged. Some independent writers suggest that Pytheas ventured even farther north than modern historians generally accept, encountering regions that seemed almost unbelievable to Mediterranean audiences. Others imagine that he attempted another expedition from which he never returned, disappearing somewhere along the Atlantic coastline or in the waters beyond Britain. These ideas remain unsupported by direct evidence, yet they persist because so little is known about the explorer's final years. There are also traditions surrounding Thule itself. Throughout later centuries, the mysterious northern land gradually evolved into a symbol of the unknown, a distant frontier beyond ordinary maps, where reality and imagination often merged. Although modern scholarship approaches these stories with caution, they demonstrate the lasting impact of Pythias's remarkable journey on generations that followed. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not where Pytheas traveled, but how much of his knowledge disappeared alongside him. One surviving manuscript could transform historians' understanding of ancient navigation, geography, astronomy, and cultural exchange. A forgotten copy hidden in some overlooked archive might answer questions that have remained unresolved for more than 2,000 years. For now, the northern seas continue to conceal their memories beneath shifting tides and endless horizons. The explorer who first described them with such careful attention gradually faded into silence, leaving only scattered quotations and unanswered questions behind. Whether Pythias's final chapter was ordinary, tragic, or far more extraordinary than history remembers remains unknown, and somewhere beyond those cold waters, his greatest discoveries may still wait to be understood. If an explorer can vanish from history, remembered only through scattered fragments, perhaps the same silence can surround a king. Our journey now returns to the eastern reaches of the Hellenistic world, where the life of one young ruler seems to end almost as abruptly as it entered the historical record, leaving behind a mystery that scholars continue to examine. Sunlight falls across broken fortress walls overlooking broad river valleys once crossed by merchants, diplomats, and armies. Fragments of Greek inscriptions lie among weathered stones, while faded coins emerge from the soil, carrying the faces of rulers whose kingdoms have long since disappeared. In these distant lands, where Greek and Central Asian cultures blended after the campaigns of Alexander the Great, even the smallest archaeological discovery can reopen questions thought impossible to answer. One of the most puzzling figures connected with this region is Agathocles. Known primarily through his coinage, Agathocles was an Indo-Greek ruler who likely reigned during the 2nd century BC. Although historians continue to debate the precise chronology of his rule, there is broad agreement that he governed part of the territories once connected to the Greco-Bactrian kingdom. Unlike many ancient kings whose lives were described by historians, Agathocles survives largely through objects struck in metal rather than words written on parchment. His coins are remarkable. They display finely crafted portraits, bilingual inscriptions, and imagery reflecting both Greek traditions and local religious symbolism. Some feature Greek deities, while others incorporate Indian motifs, illustrating a kingdom positioned at the meeting point of different civilizations. To archaeologists, these coins are more than currency. They are historical documents, offering rare clues about political authority, cultural exchange, and royal identity during a period of rapid change. Yet, despite this evidence, the historical record remains unexpectedly thin. No surviving contemporary chronicle clearly describes how Agathocles came to power. Even more surprisingly, none explains what became of him. His reign appears to end without a detailed account of his final years, his death, or the circumstances under which another ruler assumed control. The silence is striking, particularly for a king governing a strategically important frontier. The most widely accepted explanation reflects the instability of the era. The Indo-Greek kingdoms experienced constant political change. Rival claimants competed for territory, neighboring powers expanded their influence, and shifting alliances frequently altered regional control. In such an environment, rulers could lose their thrones quickly, sometimes leaving little documentary trace behind. Agathocles may simply have been defeated by another king, his administration replaced before detailed records could be preserved. Unfortunately, written evidence from this period is exceptionally limited. Many official archives were almost certainly lost through warfare, environmental decay, or the gradual abandonment of ancient cities. Historians therefore rely heavily upon archaeology, especially coin discoveries, to reconstruct sequences of rulers and approximate dates. Every newly discovered coin hoard has the potential to revise accepted chronologies, demonstrating how incomplete the surviving evidence truly is. Still, several unanswered questions continue to attract attention. Why do Agathocles' coins appear across such a broad geographical area? Did his authority extend farther than currently believed, or were his coins simply valued long after his reign ended? Could he have governed longer than surviving evidence suggests, with later records disappearing entirely? These questions remain open because the available material is capable of more than one interpretation. Some researchers have also examined the possibility that Agathocles ruled during a period of overlapping kingdoms rather than clearly defined succession. Multiple rulers may have exercised authority simultaneously over neighboring territories, creating a political landscape far more complex than ancient historians later understood. If so, the disappearance of one king might not have attracted widespread attention beyond his immediate court. More speculative ideas have naturally followed. A few independent writers have proposed that Agathocles retreated eastward after losing power, establishing a smaller domain beyond the regions most familiar to Greek historians. Others imagine that he sought refuge among allied communities, where his final years passed unnoticed by the chroniclers whose works have survived. These possibilities remain unsupported by direct evidence, yet they continue to circulate because the historical record leaves so much unexplained. Another intriguing possibility involves undiscovered archives. Throughout the former Greco-Bactrian and Indo-Greek territories, numerous settlements remain only partially excavated. Administrative buildings, temples, and fortified residences still lie beneath layers of earth, awaiting future investigation. If inscriptions, official correspondence, or dedicatory texts connected to Agathocles are eventually uncovered, they could transform current understanding of both his reign and his disappearance. Even the coins themselves continue to raise fresh questions. Advances in archaeological analysis have revealed subtle differences in minting techniques, distribution patterns, and inscriptions that were once overlooked. Each new discovery adds another small piece to the puzzle, while reminding historians that much of the larger picture remains missing. Perhaps that is what makes Agathocles so compelling. His existence is beyond serious doubt, preserved in silver and bronze that have survived more than 2,000 years. Yet the story behind those portraits remains incomplete. A ruler who once issued official decrees, commanded armies, and governed living cities now survives through fragments scattered across museums, archaeological sites, and private collections. Whether Agathocles died in battle, peacefully surrendered his throne, vanished into exile, or simply disappeared from history through the ordinary loss of ancient records remains impossible to determine with confidence. Until new evidence emerges from the ground, his final chapter will remain unwritten, inviting us to wonder how many other lives from the ancient world have slipped into silence, waiting for history to speak once again. If the fate of a king can fade until only coins preserve his memory, perhaps the resting places of an entire royal bloodline can disappear just as completely. Our journey now moves farther west into the vast lands once ruled by the Seleucid Empire, where one of antiquity's greatest dynasties may still conceal the tombs of its earliest founders beneath landscapes that have yet to surrender all their secrets. The first light of dawn spreads across barren hills, weathered cliffs, and broad river valleys where ancient roads once connected royal capitals with distant provinces. Broken fortress walls overlook the countryside, while scattered blocks of limestone emerge from the earth like fragments of a forgotten monument. In these quiet places, every mound of stone invites the same question. Could an entire royal cemetery still lie hidden beneath the ground, untouched for more than 2,000 years? The mystery centers on the ancestors of Antiochus III the Great, one of the most powerful rulers of the Seleucid Empire. Antiochus III, who ruled from 223 to 187 BC, inherited a kingdom stretching across much of the Near East. Through decades of military campaigns and political reform, he restored large portions of an empire that had begun to fragment after the death of Alexander the Great. Ancient historians described his victories, diplomatic negotiations, and eventual confrontation with Rome in considerable detail. Yet the generations that came before him are often far less visible in the historical record. The Seleucid dynasty began with Seleucus I Nicator, one of Alexander's most successful generals. After years of conflict among Alexander's former commanders, Seleucus established an empire extending from the eastern Mediterranean deep into Asia. His descendants ruled for generations, founding cities, encouraging trade, and governing an extraordinarily diverse population. But where were the dynasty's earliest ancestors laid to rest? Royal burials played an important role throughout the Hellenistic world. Tombs served not only as places of remembrance, but also as symbols of dynastic legitimacy and political continuity. Elaborate mausoleums, ceremonial monuments, and family burial complexes reinforced the authority of ruling houses by linking each new king to those who had come before. For later members of the Seleucid dynasty, a handful of historical references provide limited clues about burial traditions. The earliest generations, however, remain much more elusive. Ancient writers concentrated on military campaigns and political events rather than funerary architecture, leaving surprisingly little information about where the founding members of the royal family were ultimately buried. Several explanations have been proposed. Some historians believe the earliest Seleucid rulers were interred near one of the dynasty's principal capitals, perhaps in or around Seleucia or Antioch. Royal cemeteries located near administrative centers would have strengthened the symbolic connection between living rulers and their predecessors. Yet despite extensive archaeological work across parts of the former empire, no confirmed burial complex belonging to the dynasty's earliest generations has been identified. Another possibility reflects the complicated origins of the Seleucid family itself. Before establishing an empire, Seleucus and his relatives belonged to the Macedonian aristocracy. Their ancestral traditions may have influenced burial customs during the dynasty's earliest years, while later generations gradually adopted architectural styles shaped by Persian, Mesopotamian, and local cultural influences. If multiple traditions were combined, identifying a specifically Seleucid royal cemetery becomes far more difficult for modern archaeologists. The landscape itself complicates the search. Over centuries, earthquakes, floods, warfare, and continuous settlement transformed many of the empire's major cities. Temples were rebuilt, defensive walls expanded, and older structures dismantled to provide materials for new construction. Royal tombs that once stood prominently above ground may now lie buried beneath later occupation layers or destroyed beyond easy recognition. There is also the possibility that the earliest burial sites were intentionally modest. While monumental tombs often dominate popular imagination, not every ruling dynasty expressed power through enormous funerary architecture. Some royal families preferred sacred precincts or carefully protected enclosures that blended into existing religious landscapes. If the Seleucids followed such practices during their earliest generations, surviving traces could be subtle enough to escape immediate identification even after excavation. More speculative theories extend beyond conventional archaeology. Some independent researchers have suggested that the dynasty deliberately concealed its earliest royal burials to protect them from grave robbers during periods of instability. Others imagine that sacred objects and dynastic records accompanied these interments within sealed chambers that have never been disturbed. Although no archaeological evidence presently confirms these ideas, they remain topics of discussion because hidden royal tombs have occasionally been discovered in unexpected places elsewhere in the ancient world. Local traditions from regions once governed by the Seleucids occasionally speak of forgotten burial hills, collapsed chambers, or ancient shrines associated with kings whose names have faded from memory. Most of these stories cannot be verified, yet they reflect an enduring belief that important monuments still rest beneath the landscape, waiting for careful investigation rather than chance discovery. Modern archaeological methods continue to reshape understanding of the ancient Near East. Remote sensing, satellite imagery, and non-invasive surveys have revealed buried cities, roads, and ceremonial complexes once thought permanently lost. Every season of excavation demonstrates that even well-studied regions continue to produce remarkable surprises. Perhaps that is why the mystery remains so compelling. Antiochus III the Great is remembered through inscriptions, coins, and the accounts of classical historians. His dynasty changed the political map of the ancient world. Yet the earliest generations who laid the foundations for that empire may still rest in complete anonymity, their burial places concealed beneath layers of earth, forgotten architecture, and passing centuries. Whether those ancestral tombs were destroyed, hidden by design, or simply overlooked by history remains impossible to determine. Until new discoveries emerge from the landscapes once ruled by the Seleucids, the silence surrounding their earliest ancestors endures, inviting one final question. How many royal secrets still sleep beneath the ground, unnoticed by everyone walking above them? If the burial places of kings can disappear beneath the earth, perhaps the written conversations between entire civilizations can vanish just as completely. Our journey now follows the ancient caravan routes stretching across deserts, mountain passes, and fertile valleys, where empires separated by thousands of miles may once have exchanged messages that history can no longer read. In the stillness of the Gobi Desert, abandoned watchtowers rise from the sand like distant silhouettes. Farther west, narrow passes wind through towering mountains, opening onto valleys where caravans once carried silk, jade, horses, spices, and precious metals between worlds that knew little of one another. Every mile of these routes witnessed countless meetings between merchants, diplomats, interpreters, and royal envoys. Yet while many goods survived the journey, countless words did not. During the Han Dynasty, particularly from the 2nd century BC onward, China expanded its diplomatic and commercial connections far beyond its traditional frontiers. Imperial envoys traveled westward in search of allies, trade opportunities, and reliable information about distant kingdoms. Among the most celebrated of these explorers was Zhang Qian, whose journeys transformed the Han court's understanding of Central Asia and opened pathways that would later become associated with the Silk Road. His reports revealed a network of sophisticated states already thriving beyond China's western frontier. Kingdoms in Central Asia maintained thriving cities, cultivated fertile river valleys, and connected cultures stretching toward Persia and the Mediterranean. The Han court began exchanging gifts, ambassadors, and political messages with several of these distant powers. Horses, textiles, precious stones, and new agricultural products crossed enormous distances, accompanied by information that reshaped diplomacy on both sides of the continent. Such relationships almost certainly generated records. Imperial governments depended upon documentation. Official letters, diplomatic instructions, treaties, tribute lists, translations, and reports from returning envoys would have been copied, archived, and consulted by court officials. Chinese historical works preserve summaries of many diplomatic missions, demonstrating that careful record-keeping formed an essential part of imperial administration. Yet much of that documentary world has vanished. While important Chinese historical texts, such as the records of the Grand Historian and the Book of Han, preserve valuable information, they represent only a portion of what once existed. Countless administrative documents almost certainly disappeared through warfare, accidental destruction, environmental decay, or the ordinary replacement of older archives. The same is true for the Western kingdoms that exchanged messages with the Han court. Their own records survive only in scattered fragments, if at all. The result is a remarkable historical silence. We know that diplomats traveled extraordinary distances, but we rarely possess the actual letters they carried. We know negotiations occurred, yet many details of those conversations remain unknown. What promises were offered? Which misunderstandings shaped relations between cultures that had never previously encountered one another? How much knowledge passed between rulers whose worlds seemed unimaginably distant? Historians have proposed several explanations for the disappearance of these records. Many diplomatic documents were probably written on bamboo slips, wooden tablets, silk, parchment, or other materials vulnerable to moisture, insects, fire, and the passage of time. Unless preserved in exceptionally dry conditions, such writings rarely survive for more than a few centuries. Repeated political upheavals also contributed to the loss. Dynasties rose and fell, capitals shifted, and administrative archives were often destroyed during periods of conflict. Even so, remarkable discoveries suggest that not everything has been lost. Archaeological excavations across parts of China and Central Asia have uncovered wooden documents, official seals, and administrative texts preserved by unusually dry climates. Some have survived for more than 2,000 years, offering rare glimpses into everyday government activity. These discoveries demonstrate that ancient records can endure under favorable conditions, encouraging hope that additional diplomatic archives may still await discovery. Some scholars believe forgotten collections could remain buried beneath former frontier outposts or abandoned administrative centers. Caravan stations, military garrisons, and regional capitals handled enormous quantities of correspondence, much of which has never been recovered. If collapsed storerooms or sealed repositories exist beneath these sites, they could preserve documents capable of transforming modern understanding of early international relations. More speculative theories extend beyond established archaeology. A few researchers have wondered whether copies of diplomatic correspondence were deliberately concealed during times of political instability to protect sensitive information. Others suggest that archives from vanished Central Asian kingdoms may still rest beneath cities buried by shifting sands or hidden beneath layers of later construction. While direct evidence for such possibilities remains limited, history has repeatedly shown that forgotten manuscripts can emerge unexpectedly from caves, tombs, monasteries, and abandoned settlements. The mystery is made even more compelling by what those records might contain. Official correspondence could reveal how distant rulers viewed one another before regular contact became established. It might preserve descriptions of unfamiliar landscapes, languages, customs, and technologies recorded by witnesses who traveled farther than almost anyone of their generation. Lost reports could even reshape accepted chronologies, revealing diplomatic relationships that historians do not yet recognize. Today, many stretches of the ancient Silk Road remain active archaeological landscapes. Every excavation uncovers another fragment of pottery, another inscription, another official seal, or another weathered manuscript that survived against extraordinary odds. Each discovery reminds us that the surviving historical record is only a fraction of what once existed. Whether the missing diplomatic records between the Han dynasty and the earliest Western kingdoms were destroyed forever, scattered across forgotten archives, or still rest beneath layers of earth in some abandoned frontier outpost remains impossible to know. Until another cache of ancient documents emerges from the silence of the desert, the conversations that once connected distant empires remain unfinished, leaving us to wonder how differently we might understand the ancient world if those lost voices could speak once again. If entire exchanges between distant empires can vanish until only fragments remain, perhaps the knowledge that built one of the ancient world's greatest engineering achievements can disappear as well. Our journey now returns to the Mediterranean coast, where the remains of Carthage still overlook the sea, guarding the memory of a harbor whose design continues to inspire admiration and unanswered questions. The morning sun glitters across the quiet waters of the Gulf of Tunis. Fishing boats drift where powerful warships once assembled, and gentle waves roll over submerged stone foundations hidden beneath centuries of sediment. From the shoreline, little suggests that this peaceful bay was once home to one of antiquity's most remarkable naval complexes. Yet beneath the surface, traces of docks, channels, and massive harbor walls still reveal the outline of an extraordinary achievement in engineering. At the heart of ancient Carthage stood two interconnected harbors. One served merchant vessels arriving from every corner of the Mediterranean, carrying metals, timber, grain, textiles, ivory, and countless other goods. The second, known today as the Circular Military Harbor, was designed specifically for the Carthaginian fleet. Ancient writers described a carefully planned basin surrounded by ship sheds, workshops, and administrative buildings, with a central island believed to have housed the command headquarters overlooking every vessel anchored within the harbor. Even after more than 2,000 years, the sophistication of its design remains impressive. Archaeological investigations have confirmed many aspects of the harbor's layout. Engineers created protected entrances, carefully shaped basins, and facilities capable of supporting a powerful navy. The arrangement allowed ships to be repaired, supplied, and deployed efficiently while remaining sheltered from rough seas. Every feature suggests careful planning rather than gradual, uncoordinated expansion. Yet one essential element has never been found. No confirmed collection of engineering plans, architectural drawings, or technical manuals describing the harbor's construction has survived. This absence is striking. Large public works demanded careful organization. Thousands of laborers, enormous quantities of stone and timber, complex drainage systems, and precisely measured foundations would have required detailed planning. While ancient builders often relied upon practical experience passed between generations, projects on the scale of Carthage's harbor almost certainly involved written calculations, construction records, and administrative instructions. Where did those documents go? The most widely accepted explanation points toward the destruction of Carthage itself. During the Third Punic War, Roman forces captured and devastated the city in 146 BC. Buildings burned, archives disappeared, and countless administrative records were almost certainly destroyed alongside temples, homes, and government offices. If engineering documents were stored within civic buildings, they may simply have perished during those final days. Even so, complete disappearance is not the only possibility. Important construction records may never have been kept together in a single archive. Different sections of the harbor could have been managed by separate officials, with plans copied, revised, and distributed among workshops. Some documents may have been discarded once construction was completed, while others gradually deteriorated through ordinary use. Ancient working drawings, often produced on materials vulnerable to moisture and wear, rarely survive unless preserved under exceptional conditions. Archaeology has nevertheless revealed tantalizing clues. Excavations around the harbor have uncovered foundations, slipways, defensive structures, and evidence of sophisticated hydraulic engineering. Marine archaeologists continue to map submerged remains using sonar and underwater surveys, gradually reconstructing features that were invisible only decades ago. These discoveries demonstrate remarkable technical skill, even without the written instructions that originally guided construction. Some researchers believe the harbor itself functions as a silent blueprint. By studying surviving foundations, engineers have been able to estimate dimensions, construction methods, and possible phases of development. Every stone block, drainage channel, and retaining wall preserves decisions made by ancient builders. In a sense, the structure has become its own surviving document, although many details remain impossible to reconstruct with complete confidence. More speculative ideas have emerged as well. A few historians have wondered whether copies of the engineering records were deliberately removed before the city's destruction. Skilled naval engineers represented valuable strategic resources, and detailed harbor plans could have been considered sensitive information. If senior officials anticipated defeat, they might have carried technical documents away in hopes of preserving knowledge elsewhere. No surviving evidence confirms such an evacuation, but similar efforts to protect valuable archives have occurred during other periods of history. Other theories suggest that technical manuals were absorbed into Roman engineering traditions after the conquest. Roman builders certainly examined and reused aspects of Carthaginian infrastructure. Whether written plans accompanied that process remains entirely unknown. If they did, they may have been copied, altered, or eventually lost within later administrative systems, leaving no obvious trace of their original source. There are also local traditions describing sealed chambers beneath parts of ancient Carthage, where official records and ceremonial objects were supposedly hidden during times of crisis. Such stories cannot be verified through archaeology, yet they persist because so much of the ancient city still lies beneath modern development or remains buried under layers of collapsed masonry and accumulated soil. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not whether the plans existed, but how much knowledge disappeared with them. Detailed construction records could reveal techniques for large-scale harbor excavation, methods of stabilizing foundations near the sea, organizational systems for naval logistics, and practical solutions developed through generations of experience. Such information would offer a rare window into the minds of the engineers who transformed an ordinary coastline into one of the Mediterranean's greatest maritime centers. Today, the harbor rests in quiet contrast to its former purpose. Calm water conceals foundations that once echoed with the sounds of shipbuilders, merchants, and sailors preparing for distant voyages. Whether the original engineering plans were consumed by fire, carried away during Carthage's final days, or remain hidden in some forgotten archive is still unknown. Until new discoveries emerge from beneath the shoreline or the sea itself, the harbor will continue to stand as both a masterpiece of ancient engineering and a reminder that even the greatest achievements can outlast the knowledge that created them. If the knowledge behind a great harbor can disappear while the structure itself survives, perhaps the identities of its builders can vanish as well. Our journey now follows the ancient trade routes eastward once again, arriving at the remarkable ruins of Sirkap, where carefully planned streets and enduring stone monuments continue to conceal one of archaeology's quietest mysteries. At the foot of low hills in the ancient region of Gandhara, the ruins of Sirkap stretch across a broad plain, their orderly layout still visible after more than 2,000 years. Long avenues divide the city into neat blocks, while weathered temples, shrines, and stone foundations emerge from the earth in silent rows. The site appears almost frozen in time, preserving the outline of a thriving urban center where merchants, craftsmen, monks, and travelers from distant lands once crossed paths. Sirkap was established during the Indo-Greek period, most likely in the 2nd century BC, and later occupied by Indo-Scythian and Indo-Parthian rulers. Archaeological excavations have revealed a remarkably organized city plan, influenced by Hellenistic traditions while incorporating architectural styles from South Asia, Persia, and Central Asia. Few places illustrate the meeting of so many cultures as clearly as this ancient settlement. Yet one important question remains unresolved. Who designed and constructed Sirkap's earliest monumental buildings? Many of the city's most impressive structures reflect a remarkable blend of artistic traditions. Greek columns appear beside local decorative motifs. Religious buildings combine elements associated with Buddhist, Greek, and Persian architecture. One of the site's most famous monuments, often known as the double-headed eagle stupa, displays symbols drawn from multiple cultural influences, suggesting that skilled craftsmen worked within a uniquely diverse environment. The archaeological evidence confirms this fusion of traditions, but identifying the people responsible is far more difficult. Unlike some ancient civilizations that left inscriptions naming architects or patrons, Sirkap has yielded very little direct evidence identifying the master builders behind its earliest monuments. No surviving construction records describe how the city's public buildings were planned, who supervised their construction, or how teams of artisans were organized. As a result, historians must reconstruct the story through architecture alone. The most widely accepted explanation is that Sirkap was built by multicultural communities working together. The Indo-Greek kingdoms connected regions stretching from the Mediterranean to the Indian subcontinent, encouraging the movement of artists, engineers, and skilled laborers. Greek craftsmen may have introduced certain construction techniques, while local builders contributed generations of experience with regional materials, climate, and religious traditions. Rather than belonging to a single culture, the city's monuments may represent the combined work of many different communities. Even this interpretation leaves unanswered questions. Did foreign architects oversee the city's original layout? Were local craftsmen adapting imported designs, or were entirely new styles emerging through daily collaboration? How were such diverse artistic traditions combined so naturally into a single urban landscape? Some archaeologists believe the city developed under careful royal supervision, with standardized planning reflecting the administrative priorities of Indo-Greek rulers. Others suggest that Sirkap evolved more gradually, incorporating new architectural influences as different populations settled within its walls. Both possibilities find support in the archaeological record, yet neither fully explains every feature uncovered during excavation. More speculative ideas occasionally appear outside mainstream scholarship. A few independent researchers have proposed that parts of Sirkap may stand upon even older foundations inherited from earlier settlements, with later builders incorporating pre-existing structures into the expanding city. Others have suggested that highly specialized groups of itinerant craftsmen traveled between kingdoms, carrying architectural knowledge across enormous distances. While direct evidence remains limited, similar movements of skilled artisans are known from other parts of the ancient world, making such possibilities difficult to dismiss entirely. Modern archaeological techniques continue to reveal new details beneath the surface. Careful excavation has uncovered workshops, residential districts, drainage systems, and religious complexes that illustrate an increasingly sophisticated picture of urban life. Yet every newly exposed foundation also highlights how much remains hidden beneath layers of soil that have accumulated over centuries. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not simply who built Sirkap's earliest monuments, but how so many different traditions merged into a city that still feels remarkably unified in its design. The names of its architects may have vanished, their plans may have crumbled into dust, and their voices may have faded from history, yet their work continues to endure in stone. Until new inscriptions, workshops, or forgotten records emerge from beneath the ancient streets, the true identities of Sirkap's earliest builders remain one of the quiet mysteries still waiting to be uncovered. If the identities of great builders can fade until only their creations remain, perhaps entire armies can leave behind mysteries of a different kind. Our journey now returns to the battlefields of the Hellenistic world, where one of antiquity's most powerful military symbols seems to disappear almost as suddenly as the empire that marched beside it. The wide plains near ancient Magnesia are quiet today. Gentle winds move through open fields where thousands of soldiers once gathered beneath fluttering banners. Horses charged across the landscape, bronze armor flashed beneath the sun, and the thunder of marching feet echoed for miles. Among that immense army stood towering animals, unlike anything most Roman soldiers had ever faced. War elephants, trained for battle and capable of inspiring both fear and confusion. In 190 BC, the Battle of Magnesia marked a decisive confrontation between the Roman Republic and the Seleucid Empire under Antiochus III the Great. It was one of the defining battles of the Hellenistic age. The Seleucid defeat reshaped the balance of power across the eastern Mediterranean and forced Antiochus to accept harsh peace terms that greatly reduced his military strength. Ancient sources agree that war elephants formed part of the Seleucid army. For centuries, Hellenistic kingdoms had valued elephants as symbols of royal authority and battlefield power. Descended from traditions established after the campaigns of Alexander the Great, these animals served not only as weapons but also as demonstrations of wealth, organization, and access to distant territories where elephants could be obtained and trained. Yet after the battle, the historical trail becomes unexpectedly uncertain. Classical writers describe the outcome of the conflict and the political consequences that followed, but they provide surprisingly little detail about the elephants themselves. Some almost certainly died during the fighting, while others may have been captured when the Seleucid army collapsed. The exact number remains uncertain, and the fate of the surviving animals is rarely discussed in surviving accounts. The most widely accepted explanation is practical. Following victory, Roman forces likely seized whatever military resources remained useful. Horses, weapons, siege equipment, and valuable supplies routinely became part of the spoils of war. Captured elephants may have been transferred to Roman control, exchanged with allied rulers, or dispersed as the peace settlement was implemented. Since Rome did not rely heavily upon war elephants in later campaigns, maintaining large numbers of them would have presented significant logistical challenges. Caring for elephants required enormous resources. They consumed vast quantities of food and water every day and demanded experienced handlers familiar with their behavior. Transporting them across long distances was difficult, particularly if trained caretakers had been lost during the battle. These practical realities may explain why historical records devote relatively little attention to their later lives. Even so, important questions remain unanswered. Did every surviving elephant enter Roman possession, or were some quietly reclaimed by retreating Seleucid forces? Could local rulers have acquired a number of the animals after the conflict, integrating them into smaller regional armies? The surviving evidence does not provide definitive answers. Archaeological discoveries offer only limited assistance. Coins, inscriptions, and artistic depictions confirm the importance of elephants within Hellenistic military culture. Yet physical evidence documenting the fate of individual animals is exceptionally rare. Unlike fortresses or monuments, living creatures leave few traces that can be identified with confidence more than 2,000 years later. Some historians suggest that the Treaty of Apamea, concluded after the Seleucid defeat, may hold part of the answer. The agreement imposed severe military restrictions upon Antiochus III, including limitations involving war elephants. While the treaty confirms Rome's determination to reduce Seleucid military power, it does not fully explain what happened to every captured animal already under Roman control. More speculative ideas occasionally appear in later traditions. A few writers have imagined that some elephants escaped into remote landscapes during the confusion following the battle, while others suggest that select animals were preserved as ceremonial gifts for influential allies. There is no convincing evidence supporting these possibilities, yet they persist because ancient historians often focused on kings and treaties rather than the practical details that followed great victories. Perhaps the greatest mystery lies in how quickly such remarkable creatures vanished from the historical narrative. Animals that once stood at the center of imperial warfare, admired for their strength and feared on the battlefield, seem to disappear almost without notice after one decisive defeat. Whether the lost war elephants of Magnesia spent their final years in Roman possession, entered the service of distant rulers, or quietly faded from history alongside the empire that trained them remains uncertain. Their footprints have long since disappeared from the battlefield, leaving only scattered references and a lingering question about what became of these extraordinary survivors after the fighting finally came to an end. If even the fate of mighty war elephants can disappear into silence, it is perhaps no surprise that the purpose of sacred places can become equally difficult to understand. Our journey now leaves the battlefields behind and enters a sanctuary where mystery was not merely a consequence of history, it was part of its very design. On the western coast of Asia Minor, enormous marble columns rise above the landscape like the remains of a forgotten forest. Their weathered surfaces catch the afternoon light, while broad stone stairways lead toward one of the largest temples ever dedicated to Apollo. At first glance, the Temple of Apollo at Didyma appears open and majestic. Yet hidden within its immense foundations lies another world of narrow corridors, enclosed chambers, and descending passageways that continue to puzzle archaeologists today. For centuries, Didyma was one of the most important religious centers of the Greek world. Pilgrims traveled from distant cities seeking guidance from the famous Oracle of Apollo. Much like other renowned sanctuaries, visitors believed that priests could interpret divine messages and provide answers to matters of war, politics, trade, and personal destiny. Kings, generals, and ordinary citizens alike came hoping to receive wisdom that could shape the course of their lives. The temple itself reflected that importance. Construction began after the Persian destruction of an earlier sanctuary in the 5th century BC. The rebuilding effort created a structure of extraordinary scale, featuring towering columns, monumental gateways, and an open-air sacred courtyard unlike most Greek temples. Even though the project was never fully completed, its size and architectural sophistication continue to impress visitors more than 2,000 years later. Hidden beneath this monumental design are features that remain difficult to explain completely. Within the temple are vaulted passageways leading downward into enclosed spaces before emerging inside the sacred courtyard. These carefully constructed corridors create a dramatic transition from daylight into shadow, guiding visitors through a carefully controlled sequence of movement. Their purpose has long attracted the attention of historians and archaeologists. The most widely accepted explanation is rooted in ritual. Many scholars believe the underground passages formed part of the ceremonial experience. Descending into dimly lit corridors before entering the sanctuary may have symbolized a spiritual journey, separating the ordinary world from a sacred space where communication with the divine was believed to occur. The architecture itself may have encouraged reflection, anticipation, and reverence before visitors approached the oracle. Yet several details remain uncertain. Some chambers appear larger than would seem necessary for simple processional routes, while certain architectural features suggest additional functions beyond ceremonial movement. Were these spaces used to prepare priests before rituals? Did they store sacred objects, offerings, or valuable temple records? Or did they serve practical purposes related to maintenance, security, or water management within the enormous complex? Archaeological evidence supports more than one possibility. Excavations have revealed sophisticated engineering throughout the sanctuary, demonstrating careful planning in every aspect of its construction. The temple's unusual layout appears intentional rather than accidental, yet no surviving ancient document provides a detailed explanation of how every underground space was used. As with many sacred sites, the builders left remarkable architecture but very few written instructions. Some researchers have suggested that access to certain chambers may have been deliberately restricted. Ancient temples often contained areas reserved exclusively for priests or selected officials. Knowledge associated with religious ceremonies was frequently protected, passed orally rather than recorded in public inscriptions. If particular underground rooms served specialized ritual purposes, secrecy itself may have been considered an essential part of their function. More speculative ideas have naturally emerged over time. Some independent writers have proposed that hidden chambers once concealed sacred relics or confidential oracular records unavailable to ordinary visitors. Others imagine that undiscovered passages remain sealed beneath later debris, connecting parts of the sanctuary that have yet to be fully explored. While archaeological evidence has not confirmed these possibilities, they continue to attract attention because ancient religious complexes occasionally reveal unexpected features during modern excavation. What makes Didyma especially compelling is the deliberate relationship between architecture and experience. Every stairway, corridor, doorway, and enclosed space appears designed to shape the emotions of those entering the sanctuary. Whether every underground chamber served purely ceremonial purposes or fulfilled additional roles that history has forgotten remains impossible to determine with certainty. Today, sunlight still falls across the towering columns, while quiet shadows linger beneath the temple floor. Visitors can walk through passageways first carved more than 2,000 years ago, following the same route once taken by pilgrims seeking answers from the oracle. Yet the deeper purpose of these hidden spaces remains just beyond complete understanding, inviting one enduring question. Beneath the marble and silence of Didyma, what intentions of its ancient builders are still waiting to be uncovered? If sacred passageways can conceal purposes that history no longer fully understands, then entire cities can preserve mysteries of a different kind. Our journey now turns west to the rugged highlands of the Iberian Peninsula, where the winds still cross the ruins of a settlement that accomplished something few believed possible. It stood against the expanding power of Rome for far longer than anyone expected. On a broad hill overlooking the upper Duero River, broken walls and scattered foundations emerge from the grass in quiet silence. At first glance, Numantia appears modest, especially when compared with the monumental cities of the ancient Mediterranean. There are no towering temples or enormous palaces dominating the landscape. Yet beneath these simple remains lies the memory of one of Rome's most frustrating military campaigns. For nearly 2 decades during the 2nd century BC, the people of Numantia repeatedly resisted Roman armies. The settlement belonged to the Celtiberians, whose communities occupied much of central Iberia before Roman conquest. Although Rome possessed larger armies, greater resources, and extensive military experience, repeated campaigns against Numantia ended in unexpected setbacks. Roman commanders struggled to secure lasting victories, and several expeditions concluded with heavy losses or humiliating negotiations. Why did such a relatively small settlement prove so difficult to defeat? Part of the answer lies in geography. Numantia occupied naturally defensive terrain surrounded by hills, rivers, and rugged countryside. The surrounding landscape limited the movement of large armies while providing defenders with excellent knowledge of local routes. Roman legions, highly effective on open ground, often found themselves operating in unfamiliar territory where conventional tactics offered fewer advantages. The character of the defenders also played an important role. Ancient historians describe the Numantines as determined and adaptable fighters who relied upon mobility, local knowledge, and carefully timed attacks rather than direct confrontation whenever possible. Smaller groups could disrupt Roman supply lines, avoid decisive engagements, and exploit weaknesses that larger armies struggled to anticipate. While some ancient descriptions undoubtedly contain exaggeration, archaeology confirms that the settlement was fortified and occupied by a population capable of sustained resistance. Even so, geography and determination alone may not explain everything. Historians continue to debate how Numantia maintained itself through years of intermittent conflict. Supplying food, repairing defenses, and replacing equipment would have required careful organization. Did neighboring communities provide regular assistance? Were hidden supply routes maintained through the surrounding hills? Or did Roman commanders underestimate the region's ability to support prolonged resistance? Archaeological excavations have revealed evidence of defensive structures, domestic buildings, workshops, and signs of repeated occupation, offering valuable insight into daily life within the settlement. Yet many practical details remain uncertain. Material evidence rarely records conversations, alliances, or strategic decisions, leaving historians to reconstruct events from incomplete sources. Eventually, Rome changed its approach. In 134 BC, the Roman general Scipio Aemilianus assumed command and abandoned repeated direct assaults. Instead, he surrounded Numantia with an extensive system of fortifications, camps, trenches, and walls designed to isolate the settlement completely. Archaeological remains of this remarkable siege system still survive, demonstrating the enormous effort Rome invested in defeating a single community. Cut off from outside assistance, Numantia eventually fell after prolonged hardship. Yet even this final victory leaves lingering questions. Did earlier Roman failures result primarily from poor leadership? Or had the defenders developed strategies far more sophisticated than surviving accounts acknowledge? How extensive was cooperation among neighboring Celtiberian groups? Could important elements of Numantine resistance have gone unrecorded simply because the surviving histories were written largely from the Roman perspective? More speculative ideas occasionally suggest the existence of concealed escape routes, hidden storage areas, or underground chambers that allowed the settlement to survive longer than expected. Although no convincing archaeological evidence has confirmed these claims, such theories continue to circulate because the city's endurance appears remarkable even by ancient standards. Today, the winds move quietly across the ruins where homes, workshops, and defensive walls once stood. Visitors can walk among the stones of a settlement that challenged one of history's greatest military powers and forced Rome to rethink its strategy entirely. Whether Numantia's resilience can be explained solely through geography, leadership, and determination, or whether other forgotten factors still lie buried beneath the landscape, remains a question that continues to invite careful investigation and quiet reflection. If a small hilltop city could challenge the might of Rome through determination and careful planning, then perhaps silence itself can become history's greatest mystery. Our journey now crosses the Aegean Sea to the island of Samothrace, where elegant tombs carved for the powerful have yielded an unexpected secret, not what they contained, but what they did not. Mist drifts across the forested slopes of Samothrace before settling around weathered stone monuments hidden among the hills. The island feels isolated even today, surrounded by restless waters and steep mountains that rise sharply from the sea. In antiquity, however, Samothrace was known throughout the Greek world for a very different reason. Pilgrims traveled great distances to visit its celebrated sanctuary, seeking initiation into sacred mysteries whose rituals were closely guarded and rarely described in public. The island became one of the most respected religious centers of the Hellenistic world. Kings, generals, merchants, and ordinary travelers came to participate in ceremonies believed to offer spiritual protection, particularly for those undertaking dangerous sea voyages. Although the exact rituals remain uncertain, ancient writers suggest that initiates were bound by vows of secrecy, leaving historians with only scattered clues about what truly occurred within the sanctuary. Not far from these sacred spaces, archaeologists have uncovered a number of carefully constructed elite tombs dating to the later Hellenistic period and beyond. Many display the characteristics expected of high-status burials. Their architecture reflects considerable investment in labor and craftsmanship, while their locations suggest that those interred there once occupied positions of influence or wealth. Yet when several of these tombs were excavated, researchers encountered an unexpected puzzle. Some were almost completely empty. The absence was striking. Tombs built with such care would normally contain human remains, burial offerings, jewelry, pottery, inscriptions, or personal possessions intended to accompany the deceased. Instead, certain chambers yielded remarkably little, raising immediate questions about what had happened long before modern archaeologists arrived. The most widely accepted explanation involves ancient tomb robbery. Throughout antiquity, wealthy burials frequently attracted looters seeking gold, silver, and valuable objects. Robbery occurred across much of the ancient Mediterranean, sometimes only years after burial. Wooden coffins decayed, stone entrances were forced open, and grave goods disappeared into private hands or local markets. This practical explanation accounts for many disturbed tombs discovered elsewhere. Even so, not every detail fits comfortably. Professional tomb robbers generally sought valuables rather than complete removal of all evidence. Human remains, broken pottery, or minor artifacts often survive even after extensive looting. The unusually sparse contents of some Samothrace tombs have therefore encouraged alternative interpretations among archaeologists. One possibility is that certain burials were deliberately emptied during antiquity. Across different cultures, the relocation of human remains sometimes occurred for religious, political, or family reasons. Descendants may have transferred ancestors to new burial places, while changing beliefs occasionally altered funerary practices over generations. If such reburials took place on Samothrace, the original tombs could have been intentionally cleared rather than violently disturbed. The island's unique religious traditions add another layer of uncertainty. Because the sanctuary emphasized sacred initiation and carefully protected rituals, some historians have wondered whether elite individuals associated with its priesthood followed burial customs unlike those practiced elsewhere. There is presently no direct archaeological evidence confirming unusual funerary ceremonies, yet the limited written record leaves room for cautious investigation. More speculative theories naturally extend beyond established scholarship. Some independent writers have suggested that the empty chambers were never intended to function as ordinary tombs at all. They imagine symbolic memorials, ceremonial spaces connected to initiation rites, or carefully concealed passages leading toward areas that remain undiscovered. Others propose that undiscovered burial chambers may still exist nearby, with the visible monuments serving purposes not yet fully understood. None of these ideas has been verified, but they continue to attract attention because the island has repeatedly revealed unexpected archaeological discoveries over the past century. Modern excavations continue to deepen understanding of Samothrace, uncovering temples, monuments, inscriptions, and architectural details that illuminate its remarkable past. Yet every discovery also highlights how much remains concealed beneath the island's forests and rocky hillsides. Today, quiet pathways wind between ancient stones where generations of pilgrims once sought knowledge reserved for only a chosen few. The empty elite tombs remain among the island's most intriguing puzzles, offering silence where historians expected answers. Whether they were emptied by thieves, cleared through forgotten rituals, or built for purposes still beyond modern understanding remains uncertain. Beneath the peaceful landscape of Samothrace, history continues to leave behind carefully guarded secrets, waiting for someone to uncover what has been missing all along. If empty tombs can preserve mysteries through what they no longer contain, then entire fortresses can leave behind an even quieter absence. Our journey now turns east once more, toward the distant frontier of the Seleucid Empire, where history speaks of borders guarded by powerful strongholds that seem to have faded almost completely from the landscape. Beyond fertile valleys, where rocky mountains meet vast plains stretching toward Central Asia, the wind moves across isolated ridges that once overlooked some of the ancient world's most important frontiers. Caravan routes threaded through narrow passes, carrying silk, horses, spices, precious metals, and news between distant kingdoms. Whoever controlled these routes controlled far more than commerce. They guarded the movement of armies, diplomats, and ideas. For an empire as large as the Seleucid kingdom, protecting such immense distances demanded more than soldiers alone. Established by Seleucus, the first Nicator, after the division of Alexander the Great's empire, the Seleucid state extended across an enormous territory linking the eastern Mediterranean with lands far beyond Mesopotamia. Defending these frontiers required an extensive network of military settlements, fortified cities, watchtowers, and supply bases capable of responding to threats that could emerge with little warning. Ancient historians occasionally mention campaigns along these eastern borders. They describe revolts, invasions, diplomatic missions, and struggles against ambitious neighboring powers. Yet despite these accounts, surprisingly few frontier fortresses have been identified with certainty. The written record suggests a defensive system of considerable scale, while archaeology has uncovered only fragments of what once existed. Where did the rest disappear? The simplest explanation is that many frontier fortifications were constructed using materials that rarely survive intact. Mud brick walls, timber structures, and earthworks could endure for generations with constant maintenance, yet rapidly deteriorate once abandoned. Wind, seasonal floods, earthquakes, and centuries of erosion gradually erase even substantial military installations until little remains visible on the surface. Changing political landscapes also contributed to their disappearance. As the Seleucid Empire weakened during the 2nd century BC, authority shifted repeatedly across its eastern territories. New kingdoms inherited former military sites, adapting some while abandoning others altogether. Stones from old fortresses were reused to construct villages, irrigation systems, religious buildings, and later defensive works. Over centuries, entire strongholds could vanish beneath newer settlements or cultivated farmland. Archaeological discoveries support this pattern. Across Central Asia and the Near East, surveys have revealed isolated fortifications, defensive walls, and military outposts associated with Hellenistic influence. Yet many remain difficult to date precisely or connect directly with the Seleucid administration. Similar architectural traditions continued under later rulers, making identification increasingly complex. Without inscriptions or administrative records, distinguishing one generation of frontier defenses from another often becomes a matter of careful interpretation rather than certainty. Still, some historians believe far more remains hidden. Remote valleys, desert plateaus, and mountain corridors across the former eastern frontier remain only partially surveyed. Modern satellite imagery has identified geometric earthworks and buried foundations invisible from ground level, suggesting that additional sites may await excavation. Every newly discovered fortress reshapes existing maps, revealing that ancient defensive systems were often more extensive than previously believed. More speculative ideas extend beyond conventional archaeology. A few independent researchers have suggested that certain frontier forts were deliberately dismantled during organized military withdrawals, leaving little for advancing enemies to capture. Others imagine isolated garrisons that became permanently cut off after political upheaval, their ruins gradually swallowed by the surrounding landscape until local memory itself disappeared. Although direct evidence for these scenarios remains limited, they reflect the unpredictable realities faced by frontier communities living far from imperial capitals. Local traditions occasionally speak of ruined walls hidden beneath shifting sands or abandoned stone enclosures overlooking forgotten caravan routes. Such stories are difficult to verify, but they often emerge in regions where archaeological investigation has been limited. History has shown more than once that legends surrounding lost strongholds sometimes preserve faint memories of genuine ancient sites. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not how these fortresses vanished, but how effectively they once performed their purpose. For generations, they helped secure one of the largest empires of the Hellenistic age, watching over travelers who may never have known the names of the soldiers stationed there. Today, many of those watchtowers have become silent horizons, their walls reduced to scattered stones or buried beneath centuries of wind-blown earth. Whether the missing Seleucid fortresses were destroyed by war, reclaimed by nature, dismantled by later civilizations, or still lie concealed beneath unexplored landscapes, remains uncertain. Until future expeditions uncover new traces along these forgotten frontiers, the eastern borders of the Seleucid Empire will continue to guard one of antiquity's quietest and most enduring mysteries. If entire frontier fortresses can vanish until only faint traces remain, then perhaps the roads that once connected them can disappear just as completely. Our journey now returns to Pergamon, where one of the ancient world's greatest monuments still stands as a masterpiece of craftsmanship, while the path that made its construction possible has quietly faded into history. High above the surrounding plain, the ancient Acropolis of Pergamon rises from a steep hillside crowned with temples, palaces, and public buildings. Among its most celebrated creations was the Great Altar of Pergamon, an immense marble monument renowned for its sweeping sculptural friezes depicting the struggle between gods and giants. Even in its ruined state, the altar reflects extraordinary artistic ambition, demanding not only skilled sculptors, but also an astonishing feat of engineering. Every massive stone block had to reach the summit. That simple fact raises a surprisingly difficult question. How were enormous pieces of marble transported from their quarries to the top of such a steep and imposing hill? The Great Altar was constructed during the reign of the Attalid dynasty in the 2nd century BC, a period when Pergamon flourished as one of the leading cultural and political centers of the Hellenistic world. Builders possessed impressive knowledge of architecture, mechanics, and organization, allowing them to complete projects whose scale continues to impress modern engineers. Yet the exact route used to move the altar's largest stones has never been identified with certainty. The surrounding landscape presents obvious challenges. The Acropolis rises sharply above the plain, with rugged slopes limiting easy access. Moving blocks weighing several tons would have required careful planning, experienced laborers, specialized equipment, and a route capable of supporting extraordinary loads without collapsing beneath them. The most widely accepted explanation involves a carefully engineered road. Historians believe ancient builders likely constructed broad ramps or gently sloping access routes that allowed teams of workers and draft animals to haul stone blocks upward, using sledges, rollers, ropes, and wooden frames. Similar techniques are documented elsewhere in the ancient world, demonstrating that large-scale transportation projects were well within the capabilities of Hellenistic engineers. Even so, no complete transport road has been conclusively identified. Centuries of erosion, rebuilding, earthquakes, and urban development have dramatically altered the landscape surrounding Pergamon. Ancient roads were often repaired, redirected, or dismantled as cities expanded. Stone paving could be removed for later construction, while earthen ramps gradually blended back into the hillside after their practical purpose had ended. Archaeological surveys have uncovered sections of ancient roads and retaining walls near the Acropolis, but none provides definitive proof that it served as the principal construction route for the Great Altar. Instead, researchers must piece together clues from terrain, engineering principles, and the surviving architecture itself. Another possibility centers on seasonal planning. Some engineers suggest that construction materials may have been transported during cooler months, when firmer ground and more favorable conditions reduced the risk of accidents. Temporary wooden structures, bridges, and reinforced pathways could have been assembled specifically for the project before being dismantled once construction was complete. Such temporary works would leave very little trace after 2,000 years. The organization behind the undertaking is equally fascinating. Quarry workers, surveyors, stonecutters, carpenters, animal handlers, and architects would have needed to coordinate their efforts with remarkable precision. Every delay increased costs, while every successful delivery brought another piece of the monument closer to completion. Yet almost nothing survives describing the practical decisions made by those responsible for this extraordinary achievement. More speculative theories occasionally emerge. Some independent writers have imagined hidden quarry routes passing through valleys now obscured by later settlement, while others suggest that forgotten engineering methods allowed builders to exploit natural contours more efficiently than modern researchers currently recognize. There is little direct evidence supporting these ideas, but they continue to attract attention because ancient engineering has repeatedly demonstrated levels of ingenuity that were underestimated until archaeology provided new evidence. Modern technology continues to refine the search. High-resolution topographic mapping, satellite imagery, and landscape analysis have revealed subtle features invisible from ground level, encouraging archaeologists to re-examine areas once thought unimportant. Every survey brings fresh possibilities, yet no single route has gained universal acceptance. Today, visitors admire the surviving sculptures of the Great Altar, while rarely considering the immense logistical challenge hidden behind every carved stone. The monument itself has endured, but the road that carried its foundations has almost entirely disappeared from memory. Whether its builders followed a carefully engineered ascent now erased by time, relied upon temporary structures that left no lasting mark, or employed methods still not fully understood, remains uncertain. Somewhere beneath the hills surrounding Pergamon, the forgotten path may still exist, quietly waiting for history to find it once again. If the roads that carried colossal stones can vanish while the monuments remain, then entire communities can disappear just as quietly. Our journey now follows the dry valleys farther south to the rugged landscape of Faynan, where abandoned settlements scattered among the hills continue to raise questions that archaeology has yet to answer completely. As dawn breaks over the desert, long shadows stretch across rocky ridges and winding wadis carved by countless seasons of rain and wind. Sparse vegetation clings to the slopes, while the silence is broken only by the occasional movement of birds crossing the valley. Hidden among these harsh surroundings are the remains of ancient houses, workshops, mining sites, and stone walls, evidence that this seemingly unforgiving landscape once supported thriving communities. Faynan has long been known as one of the ancient world's most important copper-producing regions. Rich mineral deposits attracted miners, metalworkers, traders, and administrators for thousands of years. Archaeological excavations have uncovered extensive evidence of copper extraction and smelting, including furnaces, slag heaps, tools, and industrial installations dating to different periods of antiquity. The region supplied valuable metal that played a vital role in agriculture, trade, and warfare across neighboring civilizations. Supporting such large-scale production required more than mines alone. Workers needed food, water, shelter, roads, storage facilities, and carefully organized settlements capable of sustaining daily life in an environment where resources were often limited. Over time, villages and industrial communities appeared throughout the surrounding valleys, adapting to both the opportunities and challenges presented by the desert landscape. Yet many of these settlements were eventually abandoned. The archaeological record clearly demonstrates periods of occupation followed by decline, but identifying a single cause has proven remarkably difficult. Some villages appear to have been deserted gradually, while others seem to have experienced more abrupt changes. The reasons remain the subject of continuing investigation. The most widely accepted explanation involves environmental pressure. Copper production required enormous quantities of fuel, often in the form of wood converted into charcoal. Over many generations, increasing demand may have reduced local vegetation, contributing to erosion and making life progressively more difficult. Combined with changing rainfall patterns, declining natural resources could have encouraged populations to relocate in search of more sustainable conditions. Economic change offers another possibility. Mining settlements depend upon profitable production. If ore quality declined, trade routes shifted, or political priorities changed, maintaining remote industrial communities may no longer have been practical. Workers and administrators could simply have moved elsewhere as new opportunities emerged in different regions. Political instability may also have played a role. Throughout antiquity, the territories surrounding Faynan experienced repeated changes in regional authority. Expanding kingdoms, military campaigns, and shifting trade networks periodically transformed the economic landscape. Even without direct conflict, changes in taxation, administration, or commercial demand could have influenced whether isolated settlements remained viable. Archaeological discoveries support elements of each explanation, yet none accounts for every site. Some settlements appear to have retained access to valuable resources until shortly before abandonment. Others continued operating despite difficult environmental conditions that had existed for generations. The diversity of evidence suggests that different communities may have experienced different outcomes, shaped by local circumstances rather than a single dramatic event. More speculative theories occasionally emerge outside mainstream archaeology. Some independent researchers have proposed that undiscovered earthquakes or sudden environmental disasters forced rapid evacuations. Others imagine that important mining knowledge was intentionally relocated to protect valuable resources from rival powers, leaving once active settlements to fade into silence. While current evidence does not confirm these scenarios, they remain part of broader discussions because so much of the surrounding landscape has yet to be fully explored. Modern archaeological surveys continue to reveal forgotten structures hidden beneath layers of gravel, wind-blown sediment, and collapsed stone. Satellite imagery and landscape analysis have identified additional features that were invisible only a generation ago, suggesting that the true extent of ancient settlement around Faynan may be considerably larger than once believed. Today, abandoned walls stand beneath an open sky where furnaces once glowed through the night, and the sound of metalworking echoed across the valleys. The people who lived here transformed raw stone into one of antiquity's most valuable materials, yet many eventually left without leaving clear explanations behind. Whether environmental change, economic decline, political transformation, or still unrecognized forces shaped their departure remains uncertain. In the quiet valleys surrounding Faynan, the empty settlements continue to remind us that even the busiest communities can one day fall silent, leaving only scattered stones to preserve their unanswered story. If abandoned settlements can leave behind only weathered walls and unanswered questions, then the origins of an entire frontier city can become even more elusive. Our journey now follows the Euphrates once again, arriving at Jebel Khalid, where towering limestone cliffs overlook one of the ancient world's most important rivers. Here, among silent foundations and broken stones, archaeologists continue to ask a deceptively simple question. Who built the earliest structures that still stand on this remarkable hill? As the morning sun rises above the Euphrates, the river reflects pale shades of gold beneath steep limestone bluffs. From the summit of Jebel Khalid, the view stretches for miles in every direction. The broad valley below once carried merchants, soldiers, pilgrims, and diplomats between distant kingdoms, while the high plateau offered a commanding vantage point over every approach. Even today, the location immediately suggests why ancient builders chose this place. It was naturally defensible, close to fresh water, and ideally positioned to monitor one of the region's most valuable transportation corridors. Scattered across the plateau are the remains of defensive walls, stone houses, courtyards, streets, storage buildings, and public spaces. Their outlines remain surprisingly clear despite centuries of abandonment. The precision of the masonry reveals careful planning rather than hurried construction. Every block appears deliberately placed, every street thoughtfully aligned with the surrounding landscape. Modern archaeology generally identifies Jebel Khalid as a Seleucid settlement established during the Hellenistic period, most likely in the late 4th or early 3rd century BC. After the death of Alexander the Great, his empire was divided among competing generals, and Seleucus I Nicator emerged as ruler of a vast territory stretching from the eastern Mediterranean deep into Asia. Protecting such an immense empire required more than armies alone. It demanded fortified towns, supply depots, administrative centers, and settlements capable of securing trade routes while projecting royal authority into distant provinces. Jebel Khalid appears to fit this broader strategy remarkably well. Excavations have uncovered evidence of a carefully organized city enclosed by impressive fortifications. Archaeologists have identified residential neighborhoods, military installations, workshops, warehouses, religious buildings, and a street system reflecting many features associated with Hellenistic urban planning. Pottery, coins, inscriptions, and architectural details strongly support occupation during the Seleucid era. Yet one important question remains surprisingly difficult to answer. Who actually built the city's earliest stone structures? The most obvious answer points toward Seleucid military engineers. The Seleucid administration possessed the experience and resources needed to establish fortified settlements throughout its expanding territories. Engineers trained in Hellenistic construction methods understood how to design defensive walls, organize street grids, and coordinate large labor forces. Written sources from other regions demonstrate that royal governments frequently sponsored ambitious building programs designed to strengthen imperial control. If this interpretation is correct, the earliest walls of Jebel Khalid represent the work of official architects operating under direct state supervision. But archaeology rarely offers such simple conclusions. Although the city's overall layout reflects Hellenistic influence, many construction details also suggest deep familiarity with local building traditions. The limestone used throughout the settlement was quarried nearby, requiring practical knowledge of regional geology. Builders understood how to adapt foundations to uneven terrain, while creating structures capable of enduring seasonal weather and centuries of erosion. This raises another possibility. Perhaps the earliest buildings were not constructed exclusively by newly arrived Greek settlers, but through close cooperation between immigrant engineers and experienced local craftsmen. Such collaboration would have been entirely practical. Throughout the Hellenistic world, newly established cities often relied upon local labor, regional artisans, and existing construction techniques. Rather than replacing indigenous knowledge, imperial administrators frequently incorporated it into ambitious building projects. Local masons understood the strengths of available stone, the behavior of seasonal rainfall, and the practical challenges of construction in unfamiliar landscapes. The resulting architecture sometimes blended multiple traditions so seamlessly that distinguishing their individual contributions becomes extremely difficult. Some architectural features at Jebel Khalid reflect geometric planning associated with Greek cities, while certain masonry techniques appear consistent with regional practices that predated Seleucid rule. Instead of representing two separate traditions, the settlement may illustrate how different communities combined their knowledge to create something entirely new. Yet another mystery complicates the story. Was Jebel Khalid truly built upon untouched ground? Some archaeologists have suggested that earlier human activity may have existed on the hill before the formal establishment of the Hellenistic city. Small settlements, temporary camps, seasonal occupation, or isolated defensive positions may have utilized the plateau long before Seleucid expansion reached the region. At present, evidence for extensive pre-Hellenistic occupation remains limited. Fragments of earlier material occasionally appear during excavation, but they have not yet demonstrated the existence of a substantial settlement beneath the Seleucid city. Even so, archaeology often reveals older occupation only after decades of increasingly detailed investigation. Many famous ancient cities once believed to represent entirely new foundations were eventually shown to contain much earlier phases hidden beneath later construction. If earlier structures once occupied the summit, later builders may have reused existing foundations, terraces, or defensive positions. Such recycling was common throughout antiquity. Ancient engineers rarely ignored useful stone already available on site. Existing walls could be repaired, expanded, or incorporated into larger defensive systems. Over generations, repeated rebuilding gradually erased clear distinctions between original construction and later modifications. Without inscriptions identifying the earliest builders, researchers must rely upon indirect evidence. Stone blocks reveal quarrying methods. Mortar composition reveals construction techniques. Pottery fragments establish occupation dates. Coins help reconstruct chronology. Even microscopic analysis of tool marks can reveal how ancient masons shaped individual blocks. Each discovery adds another small piece to the puzzle, yet none fully identifies the individuals responsible. The absence of written records is particularly striking. Large construction projects required careful organization. Administrators assigned labor, managed supplies, supervised quarrying, and coordinated transportation. Architects almost certainly prepared measurements and instructions before construction began. Yet unlike some ancient civilizations that commemorated major building projects through inscriptions, Jebel Khalid has yielded very little documentary evidence naming the officials, engineers, or craftsmen responsible. Their achievements remain visible. Their identities do not. This anonymity has encouraged broader discussions among historians. Some argue that the city's importance has occasionally been underestimated because it occupied a frontier rather than a major imperial capital. Yet frontier settlements often demanded exceptional engineering. Defensive walls had to resist attack while supporting long-term occupation. Water storage required careful planning. Supply systems needed to sustain military garrisons separated by considerable distances from larger administrative centers. The builders of Jebel Khalid clearly understood these challenges. Every surviving structure reflects thoughtful adaptation to both military necessity and daily life. Beyond mainstream scholarship, more speculative theories occasionally emerge. Some independent researchers have proposed that portions of the earliest stonework preserve techniques inherited from forgotten regional cultures whose influence has not yet been fully recognized. Others imagine that highly skilled groups of itinerant builders traveled between Hellenistic kingdoms, carrying architectural knowledge across thousands of miles while leaving few historical records behind. Although these ideas remain unproven, they reflect an important reality. The ancient world was far more interconnected than many people once believed. Merchants carried ideas alongside goods. Engineers observed foreign construction methods. Craftsmen traveled wherever ambitious rulers offered employment. Architectural knowledge rarely respected political borders. Modern technology continues to reshape this investigation. High-resolution mapping, three-dimensional modeling, drone photography, microscopic stone analysis, and geophysical surveys allow archaeologists to examine construction sequences with remarkable precision. Features once dismissed as ordinary retaining walls may reveal previously unnoticed building phases. Hidden foundations buried beneath later occupation layers may eventually clarify how the settlement first developed. Every excavation season uncovers additional fragments of the story, yet the earliest chapter remains incomplete. Standing atop Jebel Khalid today, it is easy to appreciate why ancient builders selected this commanding ridge. The Euphrates continues to flow below, following a route that connected civilizations for thousands of years. The walls still trace the outline of a carefully planned city whose creators understood engineering, defense, and urban design at an impressive level. Their work has survived earthquakes, political upheaval, abandonment, and the relentless passage of time. What has not survived are their names. Were they royal architects dispatched by Seleucid kings? Local master masons whose expertise shaped every foundation? Multicultural teams combining traditions from Greece, Mesopotamia, and Syria? Or were they heirs to an even older community whose presence has almost entirely disappeared beneath later construction? For now, the stones remain silent. They preserve remarkable craftsmanship while withholding the identities of those who first placed them upon the hill. And perhaps that quiet anonymity is what makes Jebel Khalid so captivating. Every weathered wall invites the same enduring question, reminding us that history sometimes preserves the achievement while allowing the builders themselves to fade almost completely into the shadows of time. If the identities of ancient builders can disappear while their cities remain, then an entire royal capital can fade until only scattered clues hint that it ever existed. Our journey now follows the old caravan routes farther east, into the lands where Greek and Asian civilizations met in remarkable ways. Somewhere beyond the mountains and river valleys, the first rulers of the Indo-Greek kingdom established a seat of power whose exact location continues to elude historians. The first light of morning settles over broad plains framed by distant mountain ranges. Ancient rivers carve their way through fertile valleys before disappearing into rocky gorges, while forgotten hills conceal layers of settlements built one upon another across countless generations. To the untrained eye, these landscapes appear quiet and timeless. Yet beneath the soil lie the remains of cities that once governed kingdoms, directed armies, welcomed merchants, and shaped the course of history. Somewhere among them may rest the earliest capital of the Indo-Greek kingdom. The Indo-Greek kingdom emerged during one of antiquity's most dynamic periods. Following the campaigns of Alexander the Great and the later expansion of the Seleucid Empire, Greek influence spread deep into Central Asia. Eventually, the Greco-Bactrian kingdom extended its authority beyond the Hindu Kush, establishing control over territories that connected Central Asia with the northwestern regions of the Indian subcontinent. This expansion created something extraordinary. Rather than simply transplanting Greek culture into distant lands, The Indo-Greek rulers governed multicultural societies where Hellenistic traditions blended with local languages, religions, artistic styles, and systems of administration. Their coins display Greek inscriptions alongside regional scripts. Their cities combined architectural influences from multiple civilizations. Their political world stood at the crossroads of East and West. Yet despite the remarkable legacy they left behind, one fundamental question remains unanswered. Where was their earliest capital? At first glance, the question appears surprisingly simple. Every kingdom requires an administrative center, a place where rulers receive ambassadors, store records, supervise officials, collect tribute, and organize military campaigns. Capitals serve not only political purposes, but symbolic ones as well. They represent the authority of the state itself. For the earliest Indo-Greek rulers, however, identifying such a city has proven remarkably difficult. Several candidates have been proposed over the years. One of the strongest possibilities is Khanoum, situated near the meeting of major rivers in present-day Afghanistan. Excavations there revealed an impressive Hellenistic city complete with theaters, gymnasiums, temples, administrative buildings, defensive walls, and carefully planned streets. The architecture clearly demonstrates Greek influence while incorporating regional adaptations, making it one of the most remarkable archaeological discoveries connected with the Hellenistic East. Because of its sophistication, some historians have suggested that Khanoum may have served as an important royal center during the Greco-Bactrian period. Yet certainty remains elusive. The city's occupation history is complex, and direct evidence linking it specifically to the earliest Indo-Greek administration remains incomplete. While Khanoum undoubtedly played an important political and cultural role, whether it functioned as the first capital after expansion into the Indian subcontinent continues to be debated. Another possibility points farther south. Some scholars believe the earliest Indo-Greek rulers may have established a new administrative center after crossing the Hindu Kush, choosing a location better positioned to govern their expanding territories. Such a decision would have reflected practical realities. A capital situated closer to newly conquered lands could respond more efficiently to military threats, supervise trade routes, and maintain communication with diverse regional populations. The difficulty is that no archaeological site has yet produced definitive evidence confirming this transition. Ancient written sources provide only limited assistance. Greek historians recorded portions of these events, but many original works survive only through quotations preserved by later authors. Indian literary traditions offer valuable perspectives as well, though they often focus on religious or regional developments rather than detailed administrative geography. Chinese historical records preserve additional information concerning Central Asian kingdoms, yet they describe a world already transformed by later political changes. Each source contributes important pieces. None provides the complete picture. Coins have therefore become one of the most valuable tools available to historians. The Indo-Greek kings produced large quantities of remarkably detailed coinage. Portraits, inscriptions, symbols, and minting techniques reveal changing political authority across different regions. By studying where particular coins circulated and how they evolved over time, researchers reconstruct patterns of administration that written documents no longer preserve. Even so, coins rarely identify the exact location of a royal capital. They reveal influence, they suggest movement, they indicate authority, but they seldom answer the question everyone wishes to solve. Archaeology presents similar challenges. Many ancient cities throughout Central Asia and the northwestern Indian subcontinent remain only partially excavated. Others lie beneath modern towns where extensive investigation is impossible. Some have suffered repeated destruction through earthquakes, warfare, flooding, or centuries of continuous occupation. Every generation built upon the remains of the last. Streets became foundations. Temples became quarries. Palaces disappeared beneath later neighborhoods. Over time, identifying the earliest phase of occupation becomes increasingly difficult. Some historians propose that the Indo-Greek rulers may not have relied upon a single permanent capital at all. Instead, they may have governed through several important cities, moving the royal court according to military campaigns, seasonal conditions, or political necessity. Such mobile administration was not unknown in antiquity. Large kingdoms often required rulers to travel frequently, allowing them to maintain authority across territories too vast for effective government from one fixed location. If this interpretation is correct, searching for a single missing capital may oversimplify a far more flexible political system. Still, certain mysteries remain difficult to explain. Royal archives have never been identified. Official palaces remain uncertain. Administrative buildings that might clearly indicate the heart of government remain surprisingly elusive. Did they disappear beneath later construction? Were they dismantled for building stone? Or have archaeologists simply not uncovered the correct site? Modern technology continues to reshape these investigations. Satellite imagery has revealed buried city walls invisible from ground level. Ground-penetrating surveys identify structures hidden beneath accumulated sediment. Geographic information systems allow researchers to reconstruct ancient landscapes, river courses, and transportation networks with remarkable precision. Each new discovery expands the map. Each new excavation uncovers another fragment. Yet the location of the earliest Indo-Greek capital remains unresolved. More speculative theories naturally exist alongside mainstream scholarship. Some independent researchers have suggested that the capital still lies beneath an unexplored mound overlooked because attention has focused upon more famous archaeological sites. Others imagine that repeated invasions deliberately erased the administrative center, with surviving stones reused in later cities until almost nothing recognizable remained. A few even wonder whether ancient rivers altered their courses so dramatically that portions of the original settlement now lie deeply buried beneath layers of alluvial soil, preserved but invisible beneath the modern landscape. None of these ideas has been confirmed. Yet history repeatedly demonstrates that important cities can disappear almost completely before eventually returning to light. Troy was once dismissed as legend before excavation transformed understanding of the Bronze Age. Numerous Egyptian settlements remained hidden beneath desert sands for millennia. Across Central Asia, forgotten fortresses and caravan cities continue to emerge through modern archaeological surveys. The possibility that another major discovery still awaits cannot be dismissed. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not simply where the earliest Indo-Greek capital stood, but what it represented. It would have been a place where diplomats translated unfamiliar languages, where merchants exchanged goods from distant continents, where philosophers encountered new traditions, and where rulers attempted to unite cultures separated by geography, belief, and history. Decisions made within its walls influenced trade, warfare, religion, and artistic exchange across an enormous region. Today, its streets remain silent because they have not yet been found with certainty. Whether concealed beneath later cities, buried beneath river sediments, hidden within an unexplored archaeological mound, or divided among several administrative centers whose combined role has yet to be fully understood, the earliest capital of the Indo-Greek kingdom continues to resist definitive identification. Until fresh evidence emerges from the landscapes that once connected Greece, Central Asia, and the Indian subcontinent, the city that helped shape one of history's most remarkable cultural crossroads remains one of antiquity's most enduring and compelling mysteries. If the location of an ancient capital can disappear until only scattered clues remain, then the sacred objects that once stood at the heart of an empire can become even more elusive. Our journey now returns to the vast territories of the Seleucid Empire, where magnificent temples once housed revered relics whose ultimate fate has become one of the quietest mysteries of the Hellenistic world. As twilight settles over the weathered ruins of forgotten sanctuaries, broken columns cast long shadows across cracked stone floors. The wind drifts through abandoned courtyards where priests once walked in solemn procession, carrying offerings beneath towering porticos. Marble altars, worn smooth by centuries of ritual, stand beneath an open sky that has witnessed the rise and fall of countless kingdoms. Little remains of the ceremonies once performed here. Yet perhaps the greatest absence is not the temples themselves, but the sacred treasures they were believed to contain. The Seleucid Empire emerged from the turbulent years following the death of Alexander the Great. Founded by Seleucus I Nicator near the end of the 4th century BC, the empire stretched across an extraordinary expanse of territory, linking the eastern Mediterranean with Mesopotamia, Persia, and parts of Central Asia. It encompassed dozens of cultures, languages, and religious traditions. Rather than replacing older beliefs, Seleucid rulers often supported existing temples while introducing elements of Greek religious practice alongside local customs. This created a remarkably diverse spiritual landscape. Ancient cities throughout the empire contained sanctuaries dedicated to Greek deities such as Apollo, Zeus, Athena, and Artemis, while neighboring temples honored long-established regional gods whose worship stretched back thousands of years. In many places, religious traditions blended together, producing forms of devotion unlike those found anywhere else in the ancient world. Within these sanctuaries rested objects regarded as exceptionally sacred. Some were ancient cult statues believed to embody the presence of a deity. Others consisted of ceremonial vessels, jeweled offerings, sacred weapons, royal dedications, inscribed tablets, or ritual garments reserved for important festivals. Certain temples accumulated centuries of gifts presented by kings, generals, merchants, and pilgrims, transforming them into repositories of both religious significance and immense material wealth. Yet today, remarkably few of these objects survive. The disappearance is striking. While inscriptions describe generous royal donations and ancient historians occasionally mention magnificent temple treasures, the relics themselves have largely vanished. Archaeologists have uncovered temple foundations, decorative sculpture, inscriptions, and architectural fragments, but comparatively little of the ceremonial wealth that once occupied these sacred spaces. The simplest explanation is also the most practical. Throughout antiquity, temples frequently became targets during periods of warfare and political instability. Victorious armies often removed valuable offerings to finance military campaigns or display their triumph. Gold and silver objects could be melted down, precious stones reset into new ornaments, and elaborate ceremonial furnishings dismantled for their raw materials. The Seleucid Empire experienced repeated conflicts throughout its history. Wars against rival Hellenistic kingdoms, internal struggles for succession, regional revolts, and eventually Roman expansion all placed enormous pressure upon royal finances. In times of crisis, even rulers themselves occasionally drew upon temple wealth to support military operations or stabilize government. Ancient sources record similar actions elsewhere in the Mediterranean, demonstrating that sacred treasures were not always immune from political necessity. Even so, warfare alone may not explain every disappearance. Many temples continued functioning long after individual conflicts ended. Some survived under successive governments for generations, raising an important question. If every sacred object had simply been looted, why do certain sanctuaries preserve so little evidence of the remarkable collections once described by ancient writers? Historians have proposed another possibility. Priests responsible for protecting important relics may have hidden valuable ceremonial objects whenever danger approached. Throughout history, religious communities have concealed manuscripts, statues, and sacred vessels during invasions, intending to recover them once stability returned. In some cases, these hidden caches remained forgotten for centuries before accidental rediscovery. Could something similar have occurred within the Seleucid world? The archaeological record leaves that possibility open. Across the ancient Near East, excavations have occasionally uncovered concealed deposits beneath temple floors, inside sealed chambers, or within carefully constructed storage rooms. These discoveries demonstrate that religious communities sometimes took deliberate steps to safeguard important possessions. Although no comprehensive cache of Seleucid temple relics has yet been identified, archaeology confirms that concealment was a genuine practice in antiquity. The diversity of the empire further complicates the mystery. Because the Seleucid realm encompassed numerous religious traditions, sacred objects varied enormously from one region to another. A ceremonial vessel treasured in one sanctuary might hold little significance elsewhere. Some relics were fashioned from durable stone, while others consisted of wood, textiles, or organic materials that rarely survive the passage of 2,000 years. Environmental conditions also played a role. Earthquakes damaged cities throughout the eastern Mediterranean. Floods altered river valleys. Fires consumed wooden temple furnishings. Successive generations rebuilt sanctuaries atop earlier foundations, often disturbing older deposits in the process. Over time, ceremonial objects could become scattered, broken, recycled, or deeply buried beneath later construction. Written records offer only partial guidance. Ancient historians generally concentrated on rulers, wars, and political events, rather than detailed inventories of temple collections. Royal inscriptions celebrated generous donations, but seldom followed those offerings through subsequent centuries. Administrative archives that might once have documented sacred treasuries have themselves largely disappeared. The silence of the historical record has encouraged careful speculation. Some scholars suggest that many important relics gradually entered later religious institutions as political authority shifted across the region. Others believe valuable ceremonial objects were dispersed among provincial sanctuaries long before major conflicts reached them, reducing the likelihood that any single archaeological discovery will reveal an entire royal collection. Beyond mainstream scholarship, more imaginative theories have naturally emerged. A number of independent researchers have wondered whether certain temples possessed hidden vaults that remain undiscovered beneath collapsed foundations. Others speculate that royal priests organized secret evacuations during periods of invasion, transporting revered objects to remote sanctuaries whose locations were intentionally concealed. There is presently no archaeological evidence confirming these scenarios, yet history has repeatedly demonstrated that remarkable discoveries sometimes emerge from places long believed thoroughly explored. Modern archaeological methods continue to transform the search. Ground-penetrating surveys, satellite imagery, microscopic residue analysis, and increasingly careful excavation techniques allow researchers to investigate ancient temples with greater precision than ever before. Every season reveals new architectural details, forgotten storerooms, ritual deposits, and inscriptions that gradually deepen understanding of religious life across the Hellenistic world. Each discovery reminds us how incomplete the surviving record truly is. The temples remain, the foundations endure, the processional roads can still be traced. Yet the sacred objects that once gave these sanctuaries their deepest meaning have largely disappeared into history. Perhaps that is what makes the mystery so enduring. These relics were more than works of art or collections of precious materials. They represented faith, identity, political legitimacy, and centuries of devotion shared by countless communities across one of antiquity's largest empires. Whether they were destroyed during conquest, hidden by desperate priests, dispersed across distant provinces, quietly absorbed into later traditions, or still lie buried beneath forgotten sanctuaries, remains uncertain. As evening shadows lengthen across the abandoned temples of the former Seleucid world, it becomes impossible not to wonder whether somewhere beneath collapsed stone, sealed chambers, or untouched layers of earth, objects once carried in sacred procession still rest undisturbed, waiting silently for the moment when history finally uncovers them once again.